What's up, everybody? Totally 100% impromptu stream. Literally don't even have anything set up or anything. This is literally a case of fuck it, we'll do it live. Hopefully everybody is doing well. I have literally nothing set up. Don't have any of my tip goals, which, you know, whatever. Whatever, I'll just leave them. I still have the light on overhead. This is a complete disaster. Hopefully everybody is doing well. You're going to have to give me a minute here to get some things set up. So, some people are asking the important questions. That's right, it's an FBT stream, that's right. Alright, cool, activated, yes, good. Alright, chat should start coming through here. Let me turn off my overhead. I don't know what I just did. Oh, I kicked a $500 microphone. You are offended, okay. Jesus. Disaster. So somebody asked, did I go to my concert? So no, I'm literally rocking a Daisy Grenade shirt. However, I did not go. You know, it got later in the day. I had a dental cleaning today, just a dental cleaning, which was in the afternoon, and it took a little longer than I expected. And then I was kind of like, oh, well, you know, I still have time or whatever. And then, you know, that turned into like another hour. And then, before I knew it, I was kind of like, well, you know, like, tomorrow is Friday, and it's the Friday of Memorial Day, and if I drive down there tonight, you know, I was like, oh, the ticket says, you know, 7 o'clock, and I was like, oh, no, the doors open at 7. I was like, okay, so they probably go on at, like, 8. And then I was like, oh, no, the opening act goes on at, like, 8:30. And I was like, okay, so they're probably not even going to go on until, like, 9:30. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to drive home from Columbus, because it's, like, 2.5 hours away. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll have to get a hotel. And suddenly that makes the cost go up. You know, the $35 ticket doesn't seem as affordable when you're getting a hotel room. And then I was like, okay, well, if I get a hotel room, then I'm going to have to drive back tomorrow. And I'm like, but tomorrow is, like, again, the first day, you know, the Memorial Day weekend. Do I really want to be driving on, you know, Memorial Day? Plus, I have my game session on Friday night. You know, So, you know, I chickened out. I wussed out. I mean, really is what it comes down to. More Stone Top? I don't know. Probably not. I mean, we could, but we just covered that yesterday, Mark. No, it's really more just like I'm home and I'm not doing anything, and I was shooting the shit with patrons. So I was like, I'll just go live. What's up, Timmy? Good to see you, buddy. I'm gonna get Tim back on the show, folks. What do you think about that? That's what I think. So this came today. This is my next project. This is a Noctua 40mm by 40mm by 10mm fan, and one of the interesting things about, like, nice stuff is sometimes nice stuff isn't nice in a way that you think it would be nice. What I mean by that is I have this, like, $1,200 capture card inside of my PC, and it is a 4-input 8K SDI input card. So it reads SDI signals from SDI outputs. And it's by Blackmagic Design. And it's a very high end, very high bandwidth, right? It needs to go into a, whatever, like a X8 or X16, whatever, PCI lanes so that you can get maximum bandwidth or whatever. Not that I have 8K signals going into it. I have 4K. I have 4K signals going into it. Anyways, the thing about it is not a consumer piece of tech, right? This is I would say it's a low end, but it's a low end professional piece of tech, which is fine. Whatever, it's expensive, whatever. But the fan on this thing sucks. And by that, I mean, the card doesn't overheat. Obviously, right, a card taking in all that signals is going to generate a lot of heat. It's just really loud for a home PC. So it's not overheating at all. It's just loud. And the reason it's loud is because the fan on it is shit. And so I'm going to remove the fan on it, and I'm going to replace it with this fan. And by the way, I'm going to actually be really I'm going to be pretty bad. Not bad. I'm going to be pretty silly about it. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to remove the fan. I'm going to desolder the connections from the fan. And then I'm actually going to stick this on. And then I am just going to plug this into one of my existing fan headers. And I'm just going to control it through the motherboard. And I'm just going to probably leave it on 100% because I don't really care. And so I'm actually going to I'm just going to have the fan run at 100% all the time, which is fine. I mean, I guess if I really want to turn it down, I can. But I don't want to have to bother trying to, cut this header off and then try to solder it back onto the card and all this other nonsense. So, needless to say, that'll be a project. That'll be a project, I guess, on top of everything else that I have going on. And by the way, I don't really even think, I don't even think that anyone here, can hear the fan. Like, that would obviously be a concern of mine, right? Like, if my CPU fans were spinning at full speed, it would sound like a jet engine taking off. You would definitely pick it up on this microphone. No one else can hear this. This is strictly like when I'm just sitting here, not doing anything. It's just too loud for me personally. So, anyways, you condone the jankery? Okay, great. Yeah. So, I mean, I've done a couple of basic, PCB type soldering repairs. Not a ton though. Enough. I know enough about soldering to be dangerous. But yeah. So Tim, we'll definitely have to get. I mean, technically, Tim, we still need to finish the One Ring adventure that you, me, and Bob were running, and Bob's brother. But that has been a while. It's just tough, Tim. It's just tough to get people over here. That's all. BattleTech Gothic. I'm a little confused. Is that do you mean Battlefleet Gothic, or is there a Gothic version of BattleTech? To be clear, that's basically what I'm doing as well. So Cynic says, why was the Daggerheart anniversary thing yesterday a nothing burger? Because I did say it was a nothing burger. The reason is, well, for starters, for me, it's a nothing burger because I got to hear all about this back at Gamma, and we're like, don't tell anybody. And but also because I feel like the game's direction is more regressive than progressive, which is to say, I think that they are pushing the needle back towards more, trad style play. Not just trad style play, but we've got new dice. Okay. You know, like, that's not a Daggerheart announcement to me. You know, we've got new dice. But that's the type, in chat, a bunch of people were like, on their hands and knees, like going like, oh my God, I have to have them all. Announcing huge Daggerheart news, Age of Umbra, Season 2, 6 episodes. Okay, but that's not really like Daggerheart news. That's Critical Role news. And like, I guess there's like a part of me that like thinks that it's like the audience, right, would rather have, I don't know, the audience would rather have like a new Critical Role Daggerheart campaign than have like, no, listen, people making dice is great. Selling dice is great. But like calling that Daggerheart news, I think is not misleading, but it's just like, okay, who cares, and the style that they do their stuff in is too chaotic. It's too, it's this weird party and and they're all being really, really LA about it, And, I still think that, Jeremy Crawford has like a very, he never makes me enthused or hype about anything. I think he's a very, he's a very monotone person. And then of course the big announcement was that they're going to do adventures. Which he's like, that's what everyone's been asking for. That's what we're going to give them. We're going to create an adventure pipeline. And, that's just unfortunate, So, So Rising Star says, I'm happy they're doing some adventures. I'm the opposite. I don't want them to do adventures at all. And a path even. Alan Thomas Gramont. What was I expecting? Well, Alan, given that things take a while to proceed through the pipeline, I was hoping to hear information about two things. Now, the one thing, they did have news that I cared about. And the news is that they didn't have news, but that there was news, they just didn't have any news. And that was specifically around VTT and the CGL and all this other stuff. Again, not everything was a nothing burger. Not everything was bad. So, like, one thing that was good, I mean, we kind of expected this to happen, right? But Hope and Fear is going to be in the SRD. Cool. That's a win. So that's a win from my perspective. So number 2 is that so in terms of what would I want? So the thing about Hope and Fear is, okay, that comes out like tomorrow or whatever, like next week or something. So these things take a long time to be in the pipeline. So like, where's the other stuff? I mean, I'm not trying to say like they need to like hype up their next product, but I think they should be talking more about like, where does the game evolve and go from here? Like, is it just going to be like one new domain, 2 new classes every year till the end of time? Like, is that it? Like how does the game expand? And I would like to know questions about like, well, I mean, honestly, the stuff that people who are more engaged with the game want to know, which is things like, are they ever going to expand the existing domains? Or is it just going to be new? Are they never going to go back? Are we only going to ever have, 3 cards per level for the original, domains, or for any domain going forward? What are some of their other ideas beyond, like, transformations was a cool piece of new tech. Like, what's coming next? What's going to be in the void? Like, I don't know, just stuff that they're thinking about and that they're working on and that they want to explore. I think that would be really cool. So like more stuff about the Keith Baker thing, right? So like the Keith Baker thing is it's some kind of ghost city, right? And I don't know, is that a campaign setting? Is it a campaign frame? Like, how or what are they going to do? Like, does Daggerheart not have a license? It does have a license. It is not like this. I actually am okay with this. Daggerheart. A lot of people feel like role-playing games owe it to their communities to basically allow them unlimited and full access to all aspects of their game and never charge any money for it and have no licenses or no restrictions. So a lot of people feel about that, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's okay that people want to have certain controls and stuff over their game. That's fine. But where it has run into a particular thorny issue specifically relates around their green-lighted VTTs. There's the Foundry module with system module is one of those key ones. Now, one of the news that we got is basically that them saying, we've heard you, we're talking about it, we just don't have any news yet because we have to basically work out agreements with these people, which is fine, which is good. But, it'd have been cool to get, some feedback and some information about that. Now, why they're structured to set up like that, that's a whole other can of worms. But I just think that I personally think that, like, hyping up Dice and Adventures it is definitely the right decision from a marketing standpoint. But is it anything that I care about? No, it's not, So, yeah. The other thing about their license, which I know some people are really concerned about, right, is that, like, I think under the CGL, like, Daggerheart has the right to, like, revoke your license. It's not, like, completely irrevocable or something like that. Like, and a lot of people were really upset about that. So, like if the person who released Pistol Heart, if Daggerheart creates a new campaign frame with, like, an Old West vibe and a class called, like, the Pistolier, the person who made Pistol Art has no right or recourse to, like, say, oh, you stole my stuff, right? Which, again, I'm fine with that. So again, I've had the pleasure of getting to meet the Darrington Press team. I've gone to a number of their mixers, a number of events, and so the Darrington group is 10 to 12 people. But yeah, the number of actual people working on Daggerheart was exceedingly small. And I think the reason is you can judge by the fact that they sold out instantaneously, is because I don't think that they thought it was going to be very popular, And, maybe they didn't appreciate the hype or the fandom or, whatever. I don't know. The impact of the OGL or just the impact of Critical Role doing or sponsoring. I don't want to say Critical Role did it, but, let's call it what it is, right? Critical Role being involved with a fantasy, type game rather than, the horror game that was, horror investigation game that was Candela Obscura. Hold on a second. There we go. So yeah, anyways, I don't think that they expected the game to have that much, groundswell, and impetus, and it did. So, which is awesome, which is cool. And I can tell you, having met, I met with Darrington and Spencer and Rowan and all those people at like the Gen Con after their initial release, right? So this was like 2 months after their release. And then I met with them later that year at PAX, and then I met with them later at Gamma. And it's like, I could tell you that like each time they were just more like, oh my God, this is so much more, so much bigger, so much more crazy than I expected it to be. So hi, buddy. My doggy came in. But at the end of the day, I don't think that that's not what I care about, right? Like I don't care about adventures. And the reason is because I view the framework of Daggerheart as being both anathema to adventure, but also not really requiring adventure material. So, and it gets into some of the stuff that we were talking about yesterday with Stonetop, which is, I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what the purpose of an adventure is, and at least as I understand it, and how that has, but maybe also too how that has changed, and if it has changed, like I don't know, it's like using Daggerheart's powers for evil. Yeah, it's complicated. Let's see. I'm just trying to catch up with chat here. No, it's definitely not. But I think ultimately there's this weird tension, and we talked about this yesterday when we were talking about Stonetop. Stonetop, which is one of the most like explanatory PBTA games that has ever existed. Maybe it almost certainly is. Very deliberately speaks to your agenda as a GM. And we covered this yesterday, but Stonetop says that your agenda in Stonetop as a GM is to portray a rich and mysterious world, to punctuate your characters' lives with adventures, or the characters' lives with adventures, and play to find out what happens. But then the language gets more precise than that, and it says, it's not your agenda to challenge the player's skill, or to provide fair fights, or to punish the characters. It is absolutely not your agenda to control the players or force the story to go the way that you think it should. Now, I believe that those agendas and principles are not universal. I think those agendas and principles, and specifically those negative principles, right? It is not your agenda to challenge the player's skill. It is not your agenda to provide fair fights. It is not your agenda to punish the characters. It is absolutely not your agenda to control the players or force the story to go the way you think it should. The reason I say that, and I think this is where a lot of people run into a problem, is because they don't think about role-playing games the way that I do, which is realizing that they are all trying to accomplish a certain goal. And one thing that I think a lot of people miss is that most role-playing game systems are designed to challenge the players. And vis-a-vis, the adventures are designed to challenge the players. And what do I mean by challenge the players? I mean challenge the players and challenge the player characters. And this could be we could be talking about a super hyper tactical, Pathfinder 2 game or Draw Steel game, or we could be talking about a super rules light, OSR type game. Whether you realize it or not, both of those games, in principle, are about setting up a challenge and saying to the players, are you good enough to beat this challenge? And as a player, and as a PC, you are supposed to feel this sense of accomplishment that comes from overcoming that challenge and beating that challenge, right? PBTA and the structures of its play, I believe, and so does Jeremy Strandberg from Stonetop, are absolutely not about challenging your players. And in fact, the way that those games are set up aren't even designed to do that. And I think that's where people run into a lot of problems. They go into these games and they think that it's about challenging the players, or it's about challenging the player characters. And it's absolutely not. And I think that's where people get mixed up and messed up. So the problem I have with adventures in Daggerheart is that the tools that a GM has in, say, a Powered by the Apocalypse game, or especially, Daggerheart. Because believe it or not, Daggerheart is even more control than a PBTA game because of the presence of the fear metacurrency. The GM has a lot of control in Daggerheart because of the fear metacurrency. But the moment you start creating an adventure, the moment you start creating pre-made fights, the moment you start setting up something to be the boss fight, the moment you start setting up some sort of plot line. Now, D&D does this, and I still think that that's kind of shitty, but at least in theory in D&D, for the player or for the GM to make sure that that stuff happens, they would have to cheat. And we do know that a lot of people cheat, right? They fudge dice rolls, or, the NPC that you killed actually wasn't killed, or whatever. There's a 1.5 million things that people do to keep the game on rails. But at a fundamental level, they are being forced to cheat to do those things. Well, here's the thing, though. In Daggerheart, or in PBTA, the GM has unlimited authority through GM moves, fear moves, and spending fear points. And so they can quite literally, without cheating, control the game however they want. And so from a certain perspective, this is everything, weirdly, that some 5e GMs maybe have ever dreamed of. Wait, the game is giving me permission to cheat. The problem I have is I find that to be completely anathema to the stated principles and agendas of Daggerheart, which in most cases are sort of taken over from PBTA. In other words, I don't like that they're giving the GM, if you're going to give the GM that much authority and that much power, then I don't want the game to be about competition and fair and balanced fights. Because the moment you give the GM that kind of authority, but you're still making the game supposedly about, keeping the fights fair and balanced and keeping, the plot on the rails, you've just made the problem worse. And I don't think that, I just think it's going to reinforce really bad behaviors and traditions of play, which is to say, I think it's going to lead to a lot of performative combats in which the players think they are being challenged, but they are not. Okay? And in which the players are very passive audience members to a story that is being unfolded and told to them. And I don't think that style of play should be, you know, I get that style of play apparently is popular. So again, I mean, you know, it's just not for me. I also think that Daggerheart wasn't designed to do that, to be that system, and I think that that's what is going to happen. I think that's where that's going to lead. You know. So. But again, you know, and I understand there's some mixed language in Daggerheart, right? Because you know, you look at like combats and the battle point system and this concept of like a balanced fight in Daggerheart, but really that doesn't mean anything, you know, because the nature of Daggerheart, the nature of fear, the nature of all of that stuff, the fact that players can just surrender or avoid death, the fact that the GM isn't as an agenda, right, is not trying to win. Now, you may not realize this, but when you are the GM, technically, in a 5e game or a PF2 game, you are, to a certain extent, trying to win. And I don't mean that in like a bad way. I mean that is your job and role. Your job and role is to challenge the players and for them to feel good when they overcome that challenge, right? To feel like they beat the game, right? That's a good feeling. I mean, people play video games and you beat the game and you feel good about yourself, right? So there's a sense of, hey, I beat the game. I was smart enough. I built a good character. I made good choices, good strategy, good tactics. Maybe I even got a little bit lucky. But whatever the reason is, I won. I beat the game. And the mechanics of Daggerheart, I think, are completely anathema to that. Completely. Just completely anathema to that. Because all of the mechanics in Daggerheart don't lead to that kind of challenge. They don't lead to that kind of experience. But they don't lead to a fair and balanced fight on the GM side. And even if the GM does beat you, you all just avoid death. You know what I mean? Like, what? There's no real conceit there. So, anyways, so we'll see. They'll probably sell $10 million of adventures. Because at the end of the day, you know, that's what people want. Never. It will always, you know. Yes, I mean that is very true. Yeah, you know, I would even argue that that the disconnect really, I think it did start with 3rd edition. You know, D&D. You know. Yes, that's the rant. Daggerheart Adventures are filling a market demand. But in this case, I think the market is wrong. And I think that producing adventures for Daggerheart will be great for Darrington Press's wallet, but I don't think it's going to be good for the game, and I don't think it's going to be good for those GMs. You know? As I said, 3rd edition started the trend, you know. 3E was still pretty deadly, you know? For sure. So, But it feels like Daggerheart made a game for people who enjoy the combat as sport, but want PBTA mechanics around character. So I would say that my response here is I don't think so. I don't think the combat is a sport. The fact that we don't have an initiative system, the fact that the GM can spend fear to take as many turns as they want, essentially, the fact that the players can't lose because they can just avoid death, all of those things kind of remove the concept of combat as sport. The term Pumpkin, actually, in chat, kind of brought up was this idea of combat as theater. And I see somebody else in chat, Juniper, says combat is expression. So I like that too. But Pumpkin called it combat as theater, right? It's an emulation of combat, right? The point of the Daggerheart combat mechanics is to recreate the sort of the visuals of your cool, anime or whatever, Arcana cartoon show, or Legend of Vox Machina, or whatever the fuck it's called, cartoon show. The mechanics aren't actually designed to create a tactical experience or a sport-based experience. It's designed to create an action scene. Yeah. Helmet. I agree. Exactly. It's to create a good action scene, right? And I think it does that. And the advantage of the Daggerheart mechanics over, say, Dungeon World is, and I kind of talked about this yesterday when I was talking about FBT and Draw Steel. And I was saying that, like, in old school D&D, the only thing that you have, literally, is I attack. It's the only, like, move you have, technically. And so you could play that way. Mechanically, it is the exact same as the game, right? I attack, you attack, I attack, I attack, you did 3 damage, I miss, I did 4 damage. Mechanically, that is all that the game has. However, some people are totally fine with that. For me, personally, that is an instance where I like to add a little bit of detail, an FBT. And I call it fluffy bullshit time because me describing the attack as like chopping into the orc's shoulder isn't going to change the fact that it did 4 damage. You know what I mean? Like, we're just adding a little bit of spice to it. But what I said was that Draw Steel, as an example, I think you could get away with not playing and not doing any amount of FBT. And the reason is because the mechanics, the actual existence of the moves, do a lot of heavy lifting. Okay? In Draw Steel, if my character uses an anti-gravity pulse and I target 3 people and they get sucked into the ceiling and get crushed against the ceiling, I could describe that purely mechanically with no flavor text at all, and it will still be pretty flavorful, right? Just describing what I'm doing will give people a pretty cool mental image, right? So Draw Steel does some of the heavy lifting. The system does this heavy lifting because the mechanics are a little bit more involved and a little bit more complex. Daggerheart, especially for combat as theater or combat as an action scene, I think does the same thing with your domain cards, because they kind of give you a mechanical throughput. Even if you don't really describe it, it still is cool because the card says what it does, and when just by describing what it does, people will get a mental image and maybe get a little bit more into like a feel of some cool movie or comic book scene. So that's where I think Daggerheart's system is really good, and that having access to these, kind of 4th edition style powers, for whatever you want to call them, can help with that agenda of making combat cool. Whereas if you're playing Dungeon World, the go-to combat maneuver is hack and slash, right? In Stone Top, it's called Clash. Now, if you put me or, one of my really, experienced good players in the helm, there's a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people who hack and slash like they're playing some horrible game of Pathfinder or 5th edition D&D, where they're going to be like, all right, I'm going to come up to the orc, I'm going to attack. Okay, that triggers hack and slash. All right, I got a 7, so I'm going to deal 3 damage. And it's like, cool, he does 4 damage back to you. You could end up in a situation where if you're not like adding to it, you get this kind of really boring experience. Whereas I think that is harder to do in Draw Steel and in Daggerheart and even Pathfinder 2 to a certain extent, because the feats and the cool over the top, dare I call them anime style powers, automatically kind of make it feel cool, and so that's where I think that Daggerheart maybe has an advantage over, say, again, I haven't played Stone Top, but, I've played a lot of Dungeon World, which is, the fantasy PBTA game. And I can definitely say that, it requires a lot of heavy lifting from the players and from the GM to make a combat cool, right? Definitely to make a combat superhero, that kind of modern fantasy concept, right? Like, again, the concepts of fantasy have changed a lot. Back in the 1970s and the 1980s, a thief was this like scraggly, maybe malnourished character with bad teeth. And in combat, he's hiding almost like a coward, out of the way. And then when everything kind of seems like it's safe, he might jump out when the enemy is nearly dead and slit their throat. Nowadays, the thief isn't even a thief. They're a rogue. And they're this, Assassin's Creed badass with twin curving blades. And they are a disciple of the Shadow Dragon. And they are morphing through the shadow and spinning. And they're teleporting into their own shadow and re-emerging through somebody else's shadow. And then they are a master of melee. And they're fighting 7 guys at once. And then they're disappearing and then sucking down souls, right? Like, the concept of what is a rogue in our fantasy concept has changed a lot, right? And Daggerheart, is definitely leaning more into that sort of, I would say, modern video game like, yes, right, yes, they're John Wick, correct. They're like this preternatural, supernatural badass, right? So, and I think Daggerheart does a good job. So when you play Dungeon World doesn't have any of these like crazy, over-the-top, sick-ass anime nonsense. Like this is the original Dungeon World, but like, if I go to the thief or the rogue, I should say, whatever. The thief. It is the thief. As a thief, you can gain the move of a poisoner. You've mastered the careful use of a poison. Choose a poison from the equipment list. That poison is no longer dangerous for you to use. Or tricks of the trade. If you pick locks or pockets or disable traps, roll plus dex. On a 10+, you do it no problem, right? Like it's very much, a thief, like you're just like, I pick locks and maybe I backstab somebody, Whereas the modern fantasy is, over the top crazy nonsense, I think most people's modern view of the rogue is actually a fighter. And then they just randomly also give them a bunch of skill points. I don't, so, and even then, I think in Dungeon World, right? Like most poisons, like in first edition AD&D, thieves got poison use. Like 90% of the poisons were like, ingested. Or like inhaled, like nowadays when we think of poison and thieves, what are you all thinking of? Somehow, mid-combat, in a 6-second round, they are, as a free action now, somehow applying poison, which probably comes from some sort of like quantum poison resource that they get X uses of per day. And it somehow suddenly gets applied to their weapons and causes some sort of, DOT or some sort of like, debuff. And it's like, no, poisons are more like, I poisoned his food, I poisoned his wine, so again, we the modern idea of what a rogue is, I mean, in D&D at least, no, that didn't really exist. Not really. I mean, you could have been that, but there was nothing mechanically about the game that gave you that edge, We got a super chat from Trekkie. What's up? I see your 80s thief and raise you Prince Keldar of Drosnia from the Belgariad. Smooth as silk, a ladies' man, and a truly dangerous character. I kind of bounced off of David Eddings, unfortunately, right? Is that Pawn of Prophecy? Is that that series? There's two, right? There's the Malorian and the Belgariad. I tried to read Pawn of Prophecy, and I didn't really get through it. So, anyways, well, correct. I believe you mean poisons, but yes. Whereas Tim loves those books, so. You're not wrong. I mean, I see Cynical Dragon and Helmet are kind of saying the same thing, right? Which is like, every class kind of is like a mage. You have this kind of very strong influence on everybody being these kind of badasses in combat with, some sort of completely badass thing. Could you name a TTRPG that you think is obscure? Yes. Free market. And the reason I know this is obscure is because they only made 1,000 copies of it ever. And I don't even think it was available in PDF until just recently. So, and it's kind of impossible to play without the equipment inside of this. I mean, to be clear, they no longer called it a thief, right? They called it a rogue. It became very different. And again, that's because, because of players, but because of video games and because, combat was becoming more of a focus of the game. Okay, if you go back to the 10 hours between tangents, lots of tangents, of me, I've been reading through this old thread of a guy taking his group through basic D&D from the 1981 version of basic D&D and taking them through, classic dungeon adventures. Now, when this thread came out 15 years ago, they had played 3rd edition, right? 5th edition didn't exist. Well, if you actually read those or listen to me talk about them, you will see that, what the thief does? A lot of scouting and sneaking around and reporting back to the party and maybe trying to occasionally open a lock and disarm a trap and a lot of looking around and a lot of putting his torch out and sneaking up and listening to a doorway and, maybe trying to steal something without getting caught and then coming back to the party and saying, look what I found. And in that way, the thief is getting to do a lot of stuff. But they aren't really that useful in combat. So part of this has to do with the philosophy shift of the game, right? Which is that well, for starters, there's kind of a multi-phase process, which is these two things happen at the same time. One is, I think, because of video games, mostly, more and more people, because of video games, because of narrative, games became less and less about dungeons and exploration. And as the games became less and less about exploration, they became more and more about combat. And as the games became more and more about combat, the classes, which traditionally didn't have a great role in combat, needed to be brought up into combat. While that was happening at the same time, we also started getting into this sort of more modern game philosophy, which is that everyone should be useful all the time. And there should never be an encounter that a player is sitting out for. This was this was further exemplified because of the fact that by making combat more important and more complex, combat went from a 5 to 10 minute affair to a 30 to 45 minute affair. And suddenly asking someone to not really do a lot during a combat became really problematic. Good night, Tim. I'll see you tomorrow, buddy. That would be sweet. That would be awesome. You are the dumpster king. I'll call you the trash man. Could I list any more obscure TTRPGs? I want to see if I have any of them. I don't know what defines an obscure RPG. All right, here's one: The Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power. How about that one? Adam says, I sent you my reasoning for why I believe Daggerheart is designed as combat as sport in Discord. No need to read. I just needed to defend myself. Oh, all right. I respect it. I mean, thank you for doing that. I mean, I appreciate the super chat. But I will say this. Whether or not you think it's combat as sport or not, a sport where you can just choose not to lose is a tough sell. And one where the other side, the GM, can spend a bunch of meta currency and take a bunch of turns in a row if they want to because they think it would be cool. That also tends to dilute the combat as sportness of it. Now, outside of that, maybe we have a I'll read what you say and we can go back and forth there, Bo. But yeah. So Ponder says, oh shit, he's live. Have you looked up 4D role-playing yet? I think you'd like it. I did, Ponder the Orb, and I do not like it. Sorry. I would say, I think they listed 6 principles, and I think I agreed with one of them. And I think I vehemently disagreed with like 3 or 4 of them. Well, for starters, Ponder, one of my most favorite things, one of my absolute favorite things to do at a role-playing game table is to table talk and to have meta conversations about what is happening in the fiction. So that's one of my number one favorite things. So the idea of only speaking in character, I actually find completely, not only do I find it completely impractical, but I also find it, utterly thick. So that was the one thing I liked. I liked that they were like, no distractions, get rid of the phones, don't take control of a character, and don't do that. Yeah. That I agree with. That I was like, I'm okay with. But what it really comes down to, Ponder, and again, this is sometimes a little controversial, I actually don't play RPGs for immersion. I think immersion can sometimes be problematic. I don't necessarily want to say that it's bad, but I have seen a lot of problematic behavior come out of immersionist gaslighting, and I don't necessarily think I personally don't play role-playing games to be immersed. So that is already a big, departure for a lot of people. Yeah, Edward. Well, it's funny. I was like, I may not stream this week, and then I streamed every day. Go figure. Shinobi says, back in the day, if you made a thief, we told you to also make another character. Not only could they not fight effectively, but they also died easily. But the highly dangerous position was really fun. Correct. Live hard, right? The other thing is, too, again, I always talk about how they throw the baby out with the bathwater with a lot of these things in D&D. One of the things that people forget is that in a traditional D&D party, as Gygax intended, a couple of things. Number one, you may have multiple characters. And one of the reasons you might have multiple characters, we've talked about this before on this channel, is the way that Gygax thought D&D was going to be played is a GM runs a campaign, and that campaign occurs in real time. So every time a day passes in the real world, okay, a day passes in the campaign world as well. You might have 15 to 25 players in that campaign. They don't all play at the same time. Sometimes a group will show up on a Wednesday and they play. And during the course of their game, 35 days pass in the campaign world. So those characters are now 35 days in the future. That means they cannot be played again until you catch up to them. So what happens if you come over to the GM's house on Saturday night and you want to play? You can't. Your character is in the future. So what did you do? You made another character. You had multiple characters. So what this meant, so again, this is already a big, right? Because people think of, this gets back to that immersionist concept, right? People think the purpose of a role-playing game is for you to become this one character. Well, it was very, very, I wouldn't even say it was very common. It was just the way it was, is that everybody had 2 or 3 or 4 characters. And it was not uncommon for people to play multiple characters potentially at the same time. Now, in addition to this, it was also very common. In fact, I would argue it was such an important part of the game. In BX D&D, even there are almost as many words spent describing how loyalty, morale, hirelings, and retainers work as there is dedicated to combat. And or saving throws. We think of charisma as a dump stat, and rightfully so. But back in the day, charisma governed how many retainers you could have and what their starting loyalty was. Absolutely critical components to the game. Why? Because you weren't 4 superheroes going into a dungeon. You were a squad. You were a crew. You were a adventuring party. There were a lot of hirelings and retainers in the group. This meant that if your character died, you could immediately take over one of the retainers. Could be one of your retainers, or it could be a hireling or a henchman. Furthermore, if your character did die, you might go back to town and get your other character that you weren't playing but is back in town anyways. Or you could roll up a new character because it took less than 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Now, I'm not trying to say that dying wasn't a big deal. It was still kind of a pain in the ass. But when they changed the game and they got rid of a lot of these concepts. But, or even I think a lot of groups potentially didn't use those rules. They didn't use hirelings or henchmen. They played AD&D 2nd edition, but they didn't use multiple characters. They didn't keep accurate track of time and all that. And then they thought that dying was a real pain in the ass. Okay. So then you get to 3rd edition D&D, and 3rd edition D&D almost completely gets rid of the idea of hirelings and henchmen and secondary characters and a big party. The whole game is balanced around 4 PCs. And sure, you don't die at 0 anymore. You die at -10. Okay, but it still happened a lot. And the game in 3rd edition still had instant kill spells, which were around in 1st edition, and were still in 3rd edition. But now making a new character could take an hour or 2. And you didn't have any secondary characters. You didn't have any hirelings or henchmen or retainers to just start playing if your character died in the middle of the session. So now, dying was a legitimate pain in the ass. But they still had death in the game. And even though you died at -10 instead of 0, it still happened. So what ended up happening? Well, a couple of things. I think GMs started playing a little bit softer. They didn't want to kill the characters anymore because they knew it was a pain in the ass, and they knew it was going to ruin somebody's night, and they knew it was going to be a big fucking deal. And so they, started to fudge. And, and that process continued and continued and continued. And I think it both continued in terms of the system, but it also continued in the GM. And what I mean is, by the time you get to 5th edition D&D, you guys have played a lot more 5th edition than me, so I don't need to tell you that 5th edition D&D, the system really doesn't want you to die, right? Failing 3 death saving throws, right, is really difficult, especially given the propensity for healing, and it brings you immediately back, and it resets all your failed saves, right? I mean, for someone to die in 5th edition, you really have to go out of your fucking way, Secondly, so that's like the system. But then also the GMs, right, also had evolved and were now really, really fudging and really, really disincentivized to do anything that would, kind of disrupt the characters and disrupt the story and all this other stuff. So I think, and my point is, I don't blame them, because people stopped playing with the tools and the structure and the systems of the game that existed back in the day to make this not so bad. Right? Remember, D&D with, you get to 0 hit points and you're dead, right, came out of a wargaming tradition. If you're playing a war game and, your battle standard bearer gets killed or a unit gets wiped out, it's no big deal. That's not you. You have 17 other units to play. And role-playing games were similar to that. Now, at some point, role-playing games changed, and it became more about, these kind of individual superhero badasses. I'm okay with that. But if you're going to do that, then you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to start changing the nature of your game. And stop pretending like the game is the same game it was back in the 80s. And that's why I respect games like Daggerheart and why I respect games like Fabula Ultima, because they said, look, we're not going to try to beat around the bush. Okay? Your character is important. You're a somebody. You don't have a backup character. You're not going to take over the man-at-arms. Okay? So if you get to 0 hit points, you can choose to avoid death. You can choose to surrender. Because we all agree that it would be not cool for you to die here. So I respect that. And I don't exactly remember what the original point of this rant was, but that comes down to it. So Hardrick says, I do not remember having enough money to start with henchmen or retainers. So Hardrick, that's a great question. So if we look at BXD&D, Actually, I don't know why I'm looking at it. We have it right here. We can look at it together. Okay. So I believe you start with... I don't remember how much gold you start with. Okay, yeah. 3d6 times 10 gold. All right. So on average, right, you're going to start off with somewhere around, 100 to 110 gold pieces. Okay. Let's assume that you were a fighter and you wanted plate mail and a shield. That's 70. And, miscellaneous boops and bops and a weapon. All right. You might spend 80 to 90 to 100 gold. So I would agree with you that if you were a fighter who wanted to be in the best armor, best weapons, and with miscellaneous boops and bops, you might have a hard time starting with a retainer. However, in my experience, but keep in mind, fighters, great hit points, great saving throws, great armor class. Fighters, I consider this to be a self-correcting problem. Fighters didn't die that much. I mean, they died, but they didn't die as much. Now, on the other hand, if you were a wizard, you had D4 hit points and 1 spell. If you were a thief, you had D4 hit points. A thief and a wizard couldn't barely use any weapons. They certainly could barely use any armor, but they got the same amount of gold as a fighter. So let's say that our wizard rolls 120 gold. Okay. Well, I can't buy any armor. The best weapon I can get is a dagger, I think. So that's 3 gold. And I might be able to spend, 20 gold on some miscellaneous boops and bots. What am I going to do with the other 80 gold that I have, right? Or 90 gold that I have? Well, get yourself some retainers. Get yourself some men-at-arms to protect you. Get yourself something to do in combat, because your wizard and your thief really aren't going to be doing that much in combat. And your wizard might cast their 1 spell and be out of the game for that. Hell, your wizard's 1 spell might be Tensor's Floating Disc. And that's the only spell you have, because it's rolled randomly. You don't even get to pick. So if your wizard's only spell is Tensor's Floating Disc, well, maybe you get some retainers. And this is where having a charisma can be very valuable. Because if your charisma is, say, 8, well, you can only have a maximum number of 3 retainers, and the morale of those retainers is 6, which means that your people are likely to, give up on you, flee, not necessarily betray you, but, but to, what's the word I'm looking for? If it's a really dangerous moment, they might break and flee. Right. And that's a big deal. And again, I'm not saying that, you need one of these type of characters, but like having a charisma was actually very valuable in that respect. So now, I agree that, there's kind of a gallows humor style to this type of game. But I also think that we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons here, right? We're talking about the game where you clap your hands together and shoot out a rainbow spray at people. We're talking about a game where you summon a gigantic disembodied hand to go punch people out of the air with, right? We're talking about a game where there's a whole line of magical magic items that consist of different colored bags that you open up and like rabid badgers come running out of them. We're talking about a game where you get Qual's feathers tokens that you can flick a feather into the air and it suddenly turns into a boat anchor or a tree or a swan boat. We're talking about a game where one of the most famous artifacts in the game is the apparatus of Qualish, a gigantic barrel that is a steampunk lobster. I don't think D&D was ever really supposed to be a super serious game, you know? I think it was kind of dumb and it was kind of stupid. I mean, look at creatures like, you know, the Flumph or the owl bear. I mean, like, you would think it's like a bad joke, you know, or that like a little kid made it, you know? Your wizard's only spell is Tensor's Lingering Fart. Well, I think that's called Stinking Cloud, and I think that's a level 2 spell. So, you know, we can't, you know. Ooh. Robotics tournament. Sounds cool. Hopefully you do well, G-Helmet. I got clowned at a 5e table semi-recently because I still thought a wizard had a D4 hit dice. Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, like let's not even get into the material components for a spell, right? Like a fireball is, right, like bat guano and some sulfur, right? You're literally making gunpowder, or black powder, I should say. Lightning bolt is a glass rod and a bit of fur, you know? It's like, it's a silly game, you know? The rust monster is another stupid, silly, dumb monster. The fucking gelatinous cube. It's literally a monster that's designed to fit the 10-foot wide passageways of the D&D dungeon. You know? Like, it's just completely ridiculous. Ooh, Lightning Javelin is a classic. I do love that one. It was so cool to pick those up as a non-spellcaster because, you know, it was cool to be like a fighter or a rogue and have access to basically lightning bolts, you know? Those were cool. So anyways, Thought Devourer. I mean, there's a litany of totally dumb monsters, you know? And again, I never thought the game was ever trying to be, you know, that serious. And at some point, people said, hey, we want to tell serious stories with this game, which I respect. But maybe the game wasn't really made for that, you know? Maybe if you want to have epic cinematic fights, you need to go play a different game. Maybe if you want to have really deep, meaningful stories, you need to go play a different game. And unfortunately, people didn't. They just kept playing D&D. So I love D&D for what it is. I just don't necessarily think that it's being used wisely, you know, in that regard. And I think people are they're just doing a lot of heavy lifting, or as I like to say, quoting Blade, right? Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill. And I think that is, you know, yeah. Sure. Harn, Rollmaster, right? People only need rules for combat, of course. Yes. So, no, it was, you know, it had, you know, it was a legitimate game. It had rules for everything, and that was the way that you sort of do. And, you know, but again, it's, look, you know, if you and your group, yeah, there you go. Yes, I mean, botches were a whole other thing about this. Third level spell, Constipation. No, this is too fatal. No, well, yeah, I don't actually have that game, so that's a game I do not have. But again, I think that's okay, but I just think that there's a disconnect between what people want out of these games and what these games are designed or even, you know, equipped to do, And when I see the D&D rule set, even in 5th edition, I see a rule set that is really good at making characters who are really tough to kill and are designed to go through dungeon-like adventures with the game being challenge-based, but with the odds overwhelmingly stacked in their favor, such that it's almost like a rigged game, right? It's still a sport, it's still a competition, but it is the varsity football team playing against the Squirts, the Pee Wee team. You know what I mean? It's an unfair sport, and that's the way that we have that's the way we've made it right. That's the way we've figured it out. Again, not to reiterate this point, but if we go back to the BXD&D, now remember, a level 1 cleric had D6 hit points, and you rolled it. A dwarf had D8, an elf had D6, a fighter had D8. Okay. Now, if let's say pick a classic low-level monster, the type of monster that you might fight, say, at level 1. Just shout it out in chat. Not like a dragon or anything like that. Just a classic monster, Goblin. Goblin's perfect. Okay. All right. So we could see here that a goblin does D6 damage, or by weapon, which is probably going to be D6 damage, right? So right off the rip, a goblin could easily kill most characters in a hit or two. Okay? Look how many of them you fight. Now, there's 2 numbers here. One is sort of a random encounter, and the other one is a more proper goblin lair. But this game presupposes that you might fight 2d4 or 6d10 goblins at once. Oh, also, whenever you encounter goblins, there is a 20% chance that 1 out of every 4 will be riding a dire wolf. In addition, if there is a goblin lair, there will be a goblin king who has 15 hit points, who fights as basically a level 3 monster. That goblin king will have a bodyguard of 2, or have bodyguards who will be 2 hit dice creatures with 2d6 hit points, and their morale will be 9 instead of 7. Now, let's ignore the lair, because that's completely ridiculous. Let's just get to the normal encounter. 2d8. Okay. In 5th edition terms, again, please correct me if I'm wrong here, a first level character in 5th edition has, what? Like maybe 14 hit points if you're like a fighter, right? Like 13 hit points. Am I right? Am I wrong? I could be completely off here, but that sounds right. Right? Imagine if there was a monster that was level 1 that did, on average, 10 to 15 points of damage, and the math of the game said that you might fight 6 or 7 of them, or 8 of them. Just 'cause. That's a goblin we're talking about here, So yeah, like these things are going to kill you. Absolutely. Somebody said, let's do a rat. Now, do I think there's any sort of honor in that? No, it's all just a fucking game. It's all just a stupid game. But what I am saying is that if you're playing the game to feel good about yourself for beating it, then the only reason you should feel good is if there was ever a legitimate chance that you could lose. That's all I'm saying. I don't think there's anything wrong. Like, if I bought, and maybe people would think less of me, but imagine if I bought that game that everyone loves that I've never even played it, but whatever. Let's say I bought that game, Dark Souls, right? Or Elden Ring. And at the start of the game, I turned on a cheat, okay, that, I don't know, gave me 1,000% more hit points and armor, and I did 1,000% more damage. It didn't literally make me immune. You know, it didn't literally make me a god. It didn't literally let me one-shot kill things. It just gave me a huge damage boost, a huge armor boost, a huge hit point boost, and I basically can, and let's say I go through the whole game, and I never lose, and everything I fight, I have to push some buttons. I do have to push some buttons. I do have to do something. I can't just stand there. The monsters just don't die when they get next to me. If I just stood there, eventually they could kill me. And then I beat the game. And I told people I felt really proud of myself because I beat Elden Ring or Dark Souls. I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of people out there that would say, they would question whether I, and again, back in the day, I knew tons of people who would play Quake or Doom, and the very first thing they would do is put on infinite ammo, or they would put on God mode, and they would just go through the levels, just blowing everything up, just enjoying the slaughter, and that's fine because they're playing the game just to kill things and feel good, right? What I have a problem with is if you believe that you are overcoming a challenge and that you're actually like a good player because you cheated. That's the only time I have a problem with it. If you're having fun doing that, that's fine. That's great. That's good. Go for it. Knock yourselves out. In fact, I would even argue that every video game is like that anyways, because if you die in Elden Ring, don't you just reload the game? Right? What's up, Agile Monk? Good to see you. Right? You fight the boss, you die, you reload, you play it again. I mean, eventually you're going to beat it. So, you don't even reload. That's even better. Okay, there you go. So, Kojo says, I remember when I played Warcraft 3, I found cheat codes to move through the game faster because I wanted to see the story and the cinematics. So you look at it. Here's Zarian saying, I played BG3 with a God mode mod because the combat sucks and it takes forever, but I wanted to see what all the hype about the role-playing aspects are, So, again, that's okay. That's fine. But what I don't like is that this idea of, like, pretending like we're somehow challenging the party when we're really not. So at least Daggerheart and, Fabula Ultima are honest about that. And they say, hey, if you die, you can just totally just not die because it's not really about challenging your party. Anyways, so somebody wanted us to look at a rat. Rat, here we go. Giant rat, by the way. Normal rats have a single hit point. Ironically, a normal rat somehow does more damage than a giant rat. Go figure. Don't know how that works. But you will encounter 5d10 normal rats or 3d6 giant rats. And anytime you're bitten by a rat, you have a 1 in 20 chance of becoming infected. And if you do get infected, you will die. If you fail the save, you will die in 1d6 days. Otherwise, you will be sick in bed. If you pass the save, you will be sick in bed for a month. There you go. Well, so David, this is exactly the premise of Fabula Ultima. In Fabula Ultima says, look, the players can always choose to surrender and not die. But the game still challenges them, because the idea is that the players understand that they can't die. What they're fighting for is narrative control of the story. And they understand that when their characters get taken out and choose to surrender, that gives the GM permission to take the narrative in a new, perhaps darker or less beneficial direction. Okay? So the idea is, hey, thank you, Agile Monk, for gifting up that sub. Born, welcome.
I am strong.
Shout out. Enjoy your badge and enjoy your fun little KOLC emojis. Appreciate you. So Fabula Ultima is doing something very weird, which is Fabula Ultima says, like, your game will never, you'll never die, and you'll never go to, load game screen. But what will happen is the GM will get the ability to take the story in a negative direction relative to your characters. So, as an example, last Friday, the group fought Golbez, and Golbez ended up taking out 2 of the 3 party members. So 2 party members got reduced to 0. They both chose to surrender. Only 1 party member was left, which was Tim. Now, we could have kept playing it out, but honestly, I don't think Tim was going to survive. But what we framed it now, because both 2 party members had surrendered, I had a lot of permission as the GM to sort of make the situation worse. But I couldn't kill the party members. They chose to avoid death. And Tim knew this. And so in a classic Final Fantasy scene, the dark villain was like, you are defeated and I will let your friends live. Just give me the fire crystal, and, Tim had this sort of, internal moment where he was like, my friends are more important to me than the fire crystal. And he's like, I'll be seeing you again real soon. And he hands over the fire crystal. And you can imagine, like in the classic Final Fantasy IV, that like clink, that blink sound as it's, it's just like, handed over the crystal or handed over the fire crystal, appearing in a big blue box on your screen. And then he kind of like, ha, 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 ha. And he left rather dramatically. And he didn't kill them. And it was purely a narrative thing. But the thing is, the story doesn't end there. There's no end to the story. We just keep playing. And now the party members are like, dang, we don't have the fire crystal, now, we've gone out of the fire, we've gone from the frying pan into the fire, now Golbez has 2 crystals. Now he has the fire crystal and the dark crystal, and he's headed to the home world of the Viera to get the light crystal and the earth crystal. We got to stop him, right? Now, there's a lot of people, Keith, who don't buy into that. And there's a reason, Keith. It's because whether they realize it or not, they are playing role-playing games because they want to feel the joy and the satisfaction that comes from winning, from beating the game, from beating the GM. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The only thing I think is wrong is when you tell your players, or your players believe, that the game is about beating it and overcoming the challenges and, playing well, getting it done, facing the odds, beating the odds. But secretly, the GM or the game system are manipulating everything behind the scenes so that it isn't actually a real challenge. You see, because Fabula Ultima knows that the party members can't die unless they choose to, you can actually legitimately make the fights actually challenging. I'm talking about, like, the party might have a base success rate of 50%. Maybe even less. And maybe even if they make all the right decisions in the best play mode, maybe, it's still only going to raise it to 70% or 80%. You could never get away with those kind of win rates in a traditional fantasy game because your party would all eventually TPK. And to be clear, that could happen in Fabula Ultima, but you can't TPK in Fabula Ultima, right? So it gets away with it. It's the same thing with Elden Ring, from what I've been told. Elden Ring can throw an insanely difficult boss at you, because when it kills you, you'll just appear back at the campfire, and you don't think, oh, this game is bullshit. My immersion is ruined. So let me get this straight. I can just keep fighting this boss till I beat it? Oh, this game's terrible. I expect when I sit down to play Elden Ring that I'm going to overcome the challenge. I'm never going to lose. I'm going to beat every encounter until I get to the final boss and beat it. No one plays that game that way, and nobody thinks less of the game because it's challenging. In fact, you might appreciate it more because it is legitimately challenging. And so, I find in some weird ways, Fabula Ultima is weirdly even more combat as a sport than you might than like a D&D game. I don't know exactly what the odds are, but I'm willing to bet that like even an extremely difficult encounter, say in Pathfinder 2, might only have like the party might still have like a 90% win rate, or like an 85% win rate. Whereas in Fabula Ultima, you can actually legitimately, Loeb says 50% is pretty high. Well, 50% in theory is what every single sport, a fair and balanced sport, like, I don't know, chess or some war game, right? Outside of the individual player's skill, at the beginning of a game, you each have a 50% chance of winning. That is a truly fair assessment. In Magic the Gathering, the person who goes first on the play typically has a slightly higher win rate, but they try to get it as close to 50-50 as they can. It's more like 52-48 because the person who does go first has a pretty big advantage. But outside of your deck composition and your played points, 50-50. That's a fair assessment of your character and of your abilities. What would happen if the final boss gained all 4 crystals? Great question. Well, number one, in Fabula Ultima, there's like 7 elements. So in our game, there's 7 crystals. But in theory, who knows? The world, think about Final Fantasy VI. In Final Fantasy VI, Kefka wins. The world is destroyed. It goes to the world of ruin. Millions of people die. The whole world is destroyed by his tower or beams of light. And the party is scattered. And you spend the next half of the game just trying to reassemble your party. And depending on what you do, you might not even get back some of your key characters. Until eventually you go and try to fight him again. So, I would say, yeah. JRPGs do this kind of a lot. Right. Or you say you guys lost, your characters, died, right? Because your characters, here's the thing, in Fabula Ultima, your characters can't die in a combat. But they can die like in a cutscene. You know what I mean? Like you could die by choosing to die, or like a pre-approved situation. So the group might all agree, all right, you know what? We lost. Let's pick this thing up, 50 years from now, and our characters are like the struggling survivors of a broken rule. The reason is because Fabula Ultima, at its core, as a whole campaign, is not about that sensation of feeling like I beat the game. Fabula Ultima is like, wow, what a cool story we just made. That's the point of the game. The point of the game, the point of the system, is to facilitate you telling cool stories. And so the achievement isn't, hey, we played well and we beat the fight. It's, you know, we told a good story. Yeah, I mean, I think they still have this, but like, I remember there was a mode in Dungeon Hack, right? The hardcore mode, where if your character died, like, you couldn't save. It would only auto save. So you couldn't manually save. It would just auto save. And it would auto save randomly, like every couple minutes. And if your character died, it deleted your save. So I guess that's playing the game on hard, you know. And you might say that sounds really extreme and really hardcore. I think they still have this in modern games called hardcore mode. Well, guess what? Technically, that is like what your 5th edition campaign is. That's what your PF2 campaign is. It's playing the game on hardcore mode, right? You don't get to save and reload the game if the fight didn't go your way, you know? And most of the time, if your party gets wiped out, TPK'd, unless the GM does some really hardcore Deus Ex Machina bullshit, the campaign is probably over. Most of the time. Always a good choice. Here's a hot topic poll. What is your favorite Paramore song? No, that was a hot topic joke. No, I do have a poll though. Okay, here we go. All right. Poll is reset and up. What is your favorite Lord of the Rings film? Is it Fellowship? Is it The Two Towers? Or is it Return of the King? I don't really know who has a giant sword. It is true that they have the plate armor, which, you know, so Edward says none of them perish the thought. It's a good choice, John. Good choice. Oh, we got some Return of the Kings. Give me an entire film of Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli being bros. Wow, no love for Return of the King. I will answer and say my favorite is Fellowship. I think Fellowship is so good, especially the movie, right? Which I think it kind of extends the end. But I mean the battle at Amon Hen, but the Moria sequence is just so amazing and done so well. And they just cover so much ground. I love that the Fellowship is all together and you get to see those interactions. You know, once you get to the Two Tower and you start cutting between multiple, scenes or multiple groups, it starts to become a bit disjointed. By the way, as an aside, it's one of the reasons why I like the earlier Wheel of Time books more than I like most of the later ones. I like the earlier Wheel of Time books because there's really just the party. You know, it's the Emmen Feelers and, Lan and Moraine or whatever. But then once you start getting into like the later books, it's like, you're jumping from country to country to country to country to country. And you might only get to a character, 5 chapters a book. And it's just too diffused. It's too spread out, Yes. Exactly, Juniper. That's what I was trying to say about the fight thing at Amon Hen, which is having the Boromir stuff at the end was such a good adaptation. Fantastic, you know? So this is a great question. Did Gandalf surrender or did Gandalf sacrifice? It's a great question, right? Because on one hand, he does die, but he takes out the Balrog. I like to think that he surrendered, or I'm sorry, sacrificed. He did die, and then he had to make a new character. And the GM was like, okay, just chill out. And then halfway through the session, we'll reintroduce your character. And you're like, but dude, I really wanted to be a wizard. I know. But don't worry, I got to figure it out. We'll make you a new character. That's what I think happened. So Lope asks a great question. I think Lope is talking back about like what happens if like our Fabula Ultima party fails. The bad guys destroy the world. The party regroups and they go after him a second time. He says, what would happen if they failed again a second time? So this is the other thing, Lope, which I think is another reason why I've played games with people I love, and they have really, really struggled. So. I don't even know where it is. Okay. I was looking for Mutants and Masterminds, which is a superhero game. A good buddy of mine, Matt, who has been on this channel, he played Burl in our Rise of the Runelords game. Mutants and Masterminds is a superhero RPG. And it is a game that's sort of, it's 3rd edition, but it has some like Fate-like elements. And one of the things about this game is, as a player, you are incentivized to have comic book appropriate stuff happen to your character, including having annoying stuff happen to your character. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is, if you're playing Mutants and Masterminds, and you're the player of Superman, you might be like, oh, hey, those enemy soldiers, yeah, they totally have kryptonite bullets. And you're like, why would the player want the enemy to have kryptonite bullets? And the reason is because that's what happens in the comic books. And Mutants and Masterminds says, cool, because your character is experiencing this difficulty, you get this superhero point. When I played with my friend Matt thought of role-playing games much the same way he thought of video games and Magic the Gathering. He was there to win. Why would he ever put himself at a disadvantage? That seems stupid. So Matt didn't, which meant he never, think about how often you watch, like, the X-Men. Man, Cyclops loses his visor a lot, doesn't he? You'd think he would really have that thing locked in. Man, Jean Grey really has a lot of problems with the Phoenix Force, doesn't she? It's because seeing those foils and downsides gives the characters that much more definition to them. But in Mutants and Masterminds, they say, well, you want your as a character, as a player, you want your character to suffer those disadvantages and those drawbacks. Which is a long way of saying, if the players went up against the bad guy, say in my Fabula Ultima campaign, they went up against him, he got all the crystals, they faced him, they all die, they all choose to surrender, and I say, okay, this is a big surrender. The bad guy, destroys the world, blah, blah, blah. Rebuild it. And my party went and fought that bad guy again, say, 10 or 20 sessions later. Especially if they were near the end of the game. Like, the game literally only goes to 50th level. If my party fought him in the final battle, it's in space, fighting him as a god, and my party all lost, I might say, you know, do you guys want to surrender? Do you guys want, and I think my party would say, no, I think we're okay losing here. We think that that is an appropriate way for the story. Or they might say, you know what, you know, these two, you know, the 3 party members are going to surrender, but me and this other party member are going to sacrifice. And unfortunately, you know, we're not going to make it back, right? It's like the end of the Avengers movie. Did the Avengers win at the end of Endgame? No, they didn't. Tony Stark died. Spoiler alert. So, you know, that's like a situation where it's like, hey, Thanos won again, right? Because in the first movie, Infinity War, Thanos wins. And everybody chooses to surrender. So they get to play again. And they play the second one. And Thanos wins again. But this time, Tony Stark chooses to sacrifice, or chooses to go out in a blaze of glory, to use the Daggerheart term. And the GM and everybody agrees this is a cool narrative moment. The cost of victory was high. Yes, if we had played better or rolled better, we could have beaten the bad guy and we all got to come home. Instead, somebody had to pay the ultimate price. Or maybe 2 people had to pay the ultimate price, right? Black Widow and Iron Man. You know, not everybody gets to go home. And that is our story. And everybody is happy with that story. Because it was never about, can we beat him? It's about, is this a satisfying story and a satisfying conclusion? And that is a very weird thing for some people to, you know, to deal with, to think about, to have experience with. Right. He is Iron Man, right? Yeah. I mean, Scarlett Johansson was a very attractive person. So, I mean, there's that. But, I mean, I thought the whole thing with Black Widow and Hawkeye fighting over who gets to sacrifice himself was great, you know? The only game I play like that is Fiasco, which is okay. That's fair. That is fair. Or Daggerheart, which you're about to run. Because Daggerheart literally has both those mechanics. But again, it's a very different mentality of play. And to be clear, I love that style of play. But I also love the style of play of being like, hey, this is my dungeon. Now, I'm not going to cheat, but I have made this challenging. There are monsters and traps and dangers and puzzles and challenges. And there's great treasure and powerful magical items and some really cool shit. And there's some dangerous fucking creatures. I don't know what's going to happen. There are random tables, random encounters. Okay? And I am not going to cheat. But be aware, I am here to be your adversary. Okay? Think of it like, you know, like an NFL game. You know, the other team doesn't hate, you know, the other team, but they are very clearly their opposition. They are very clearly their adversaries. They are very clearly their opponents. So I'm going to sit down in my GM and I'm coming at you from a perspective of, you know, I'm here to make you lose. And if you beat me, you should legitimately feel good about yourself. Especially if the reason you beat me is because you played well, or you made a good PC, or maybe just because you got damn lucky. I recall that we were playing Axe, Adventure Conqueror King. And the party was all, I think, level 1. And there was maybe 3 or 4 PCs. They definitely had a handful of henchmen with them. And I don't remember exactly where or how or what they were doing, but the party was camped in like a small little wooded copse of trees on a kind of like on a little island in the middle of a dry riverbed. And it was nighttime, and they had their campfire up, and there was somebody watching guard, and they saw 2 forms approaching their camp at night. And I don't exactly remember how or why it happened, but basically the group figured out very quickly it was 2 Medusa. They're a level 1 party, and it was 2 Medusa. And, you know, Smith was like, well, we're fucking dead, you know? This is some bullshit. And he was right. But they had a lot of henchmen. And the henchmen held strong. And they had bows. So they started shooting at the Medusa. And this is Adventure Conqueror King is an older school system, right? So you don't have like HP bloat and the, you know, just because they were Medusa doesn't mean their AC was 35. You know, they're women with snakeskin. Their AC is like 13, you know, because that's what it should be. And Smith had some sort of like, I don't know if he was a barbarian, but he had some sort of greatsword. And Smith said, well, fuck it. And Smith charged them, which I still think was a little bit rash, but it's Smith, you know, whatever. Drive it like you stole it. And the henchmen fired their bows. The party fired their bows. Smith goes in there, somehow makes the saves versus petrification, kills the Medusa. The other Medusa turns, tries to stab him, bite him with her poison snakes. Smith somehow makes the saving throw, and then they kill the other one. And it took like, you know, I don't know, 5 minutes. But they all understood that that was a legitimate victory because they were not supposed to win, but they did. You know, this was like, you know, this is like the underdogs beating the undefeated, you know, the team that's 11-0, and, you know, they're going up against the team that's like, you know, 2-9, and they win somehow. And that was a legitimate moment of victory because they should have lost. They played. They made some good decisions. They had their hirelings. They had their bows. They had a somewhat defensible camp. They got a little lucky. They were brave. And they won. That was a cool moment. That was a legitimate moment of victory. But part of the reason that was a legitimate moment of victory is because if we played that same encounter out 3 more times, over and over and over again, they would probably lose the other 3. So you have to be, you know, kind of willing to, you know, to roll with the punches. You know, you got to take the good with the bad. It's kind of, I guess, what I would say. And turns out a lot of people don't like that. They don't like the bad. They just want the good. Just good. Only good, please. And so that's why you have this obsession now with like, well, is this a CR balanced fight? You know, I don't like 5th edition because, you know, the CR system isn't good enough and I can't properly tune in and dial in a proper thing, right? It's not challenging enough, or it's too challenging, you know? So, and that's, now granted, I'm not saying that is a better experience. I'm just simply saying it is a unique one. And that's what part of what makes role-playing games, for me, so fun. But that is a very different style than, say, Fabula Ultima. Because when I sit down to play Fabula Ultima, I am there to tell a cool and compelling story. And, you know, we're playing tomorrow, Fabula Ultima. The group's I think the group is level 19. They're about to be level 20. And I think the reason I am struggling with Fabula Ultima a little bit is because the game is very much a narrative, we're here to tell story type game. But then it also has this very strong emphasis on building really complex, challenging combats. And as a GM, I don't really feel a strong compulsion or enjoyment in building a highly complex combat that kind of doesn't matter anyways. And it's not like in Daggerheart where, we're using very generic terms. I can just spend some fear and make some bullshit happen. I can, whatever. No, like Fabula Ultima has rules and has an initiative order and stuff like that. And the monster, in fact, monsters you don't even target with your monsters in Fabula Ultima, right? You cannot pick your target, right? It's randomly rolled. In fact, most monsters have what's called a routine, right? Where it says like, okay, the first time this monster activates in a round, it uses this ability. Again, targeting a random character. The second time, it goes into combat, it'll use this ability, targeting the character with the most MP. The third time it goes, right? So it's almost like I'm designed to like set it up and have it do its thing. Which is fine, except it doesn't matter if I win because the party will choose to either surrender or sacrifice. So that is a dissonance. And I think it's really enjoyable for people who love to make monsters and love to make complex MMO/JRPG style boss monsters with like multiple phases and, different procedural effects and don't stand in the fire. And I am not one of those people. I actually don't like making monsters, like period. I've never enjoyed it. I don't think it's I like making magic items. I like making weird magical effects. I'm just not a person. I don't enjoy making new monsters. In fact, I like to use monsters that the party already knows what they are. I prefer resonance over novelty. I would rather throw trolls at the party and have them know what a troll is than throw some brand new monster that I made up and everyone goes, well, what the fuck is that thing? And then I'm trying to describe it, and it probably has some sort of weird tentacle face, because I always seem to end up having weird tentacle faces, at least in Pathfinder 2. And I find that it just doesn't hit as strongly as using a tried and true monster. If I'm playing D&D and the group is making their way through a dark, cavernous dungeon, and then the cavern suddenly opens up into a wider expanse, and they can see that this chamber looks strangely geometric, as if it's been carved out one 10-foot by 10-foot by 10-foot cube at a time. And some of my players might already get wide eye at hearing that. And then everybody else, when I describe floating down from the darkness above, a floating orb with a singular gigantic eye washing over them as they see the glow from their magical items dwindle and the tentacled eye stalks around everyone goes, oh shit, son, it's a beholder. Like, I find that to be very valuable, and I like to lean into that, and I like to use that rather than being like, here's some brand new monster that's going to give you no emotional response because you have no idea what this thing is and you have no idea what this thing can do. So, anyways, I don't like making monsters. And I think that a lot of Fabula Ultima, the creator of the game, I think, likes to make monsters. And I think a big part of the GMing of that game is making monsters. And at least maybe I'm, again, not like an expert in the game, but, you know, I've run it like 10 or so times now. And I feel like I'm getting that vibe. And it's just not for me. So. Derek, what did you expect to happen with the Medusa? I expected the majority of the party to turn to stone. More or less. Or get poisoned to death and die instantly. Are we talking about crows or something? No. No, I don't. Unfortunately, as part of my, not having a job, I did cancel my MCDM Patreon last year, and so I did not get access to like the early Crows release stuff. So I haven't actually seen it yet. I have it. In fact, It's right there. As an example, Juniper, one of the problems I have with the bestiary is so many of the monsters are like solo champion 4, solo champion 5, villain, type creature. Here's a champion 3. Here's a solo unique villain. Here's a solo villain. Here's a... Okay, that's a normal creature. All right, fair enough. Like, a lot of the creatures in this game are, basically villains. Solo unique villains, solo villains, champion villains, whatever. And I wanted, give me... Now, they gave you the quick assembly rules, but I would rather them give me, like, hey... Here's 5 brutes at level 10. Here's 5 brutes at level 20. Here's 5 brutes. Correct. The core book is all soldiers. Well, it's not just soldiers, but the problem is, Lance, the core book monsters. So I was having a conversation with this on the Discord. I use a lot of the core book monsters, and I was like, are these monsters too easy? Because compared to the soldiers in the core book, comparing the soldiers to the soldiers from the bestiary, the soldiers in the core book look like, is this a soldier for ants? Like, a soldier from this book has like 75 abilities, whereas like in the core book it's like gas mask, and that's like its only move, like they're very basic, and so I wanted, that type of stuff. So quick assembly is better than the other thing, but I still don't like it. Like I understand that for some GMs, right? Like going, okay, I'm going to have a mage, and, mages typically perform their actions in a routine. After they've cast each of their spells once, they will resume from the beginning, such as casting Ignis, then Drain Spirit. They usually save their normal attack for when they're out of mem points, but elite and champions should use it as part of their MP, or their routine. Perhaps Ignis, then a normal attack, then Drain Spirit, repeat. And then they talk about customizing, and it's like, okay, so here's our base things of mage. And then it's like, okay, we can add, all right, maybe I'll add elemental shift, and then I'll add drain spirit, flare, and omega, and like all this other stuff. And like, I get that a lot of GMs like to build monsters the same way that I guess a lot of players like to build PCs. And I don't like to do either of those. I don't like to build PCs, and I don't like to build monsters. In fact, building monsters feels a lot like building PCs. And I don't want to do that. It feels like work to me, and I just don't like doing it. I would rather them have given me a book that had, 20 soldier brutes and 20 soldier hunters and 20 soldier mages at levels, 10, 20, 30, 40, or whatever, 50, whatever. Give me 10 monsters of sentinel, 10 monsters of support, whatever. That I would rather have that. And then I could just use it. And I want the monster to be iconic. To be clear, I am totally happy with, and again, it's like, oh, cool, Gorgon. And it's like, well, nope, it's a brute solo unique villain. And it's like, okay, I don't need everything in the game to be a solo unique villain. And, I'm not saying that this is like crazy, but there's just, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and so anyways, and the other reason that this is, I guess, annoying to me, is because Fabula Ultima, is a game that's like, hey, play to find out, and your players could spend Fabula points to change the story, and it could go anywhere and everywhere. But it's like, well, if I'm spending 20 minutes or 30 minutes designing a creature, doesn't that put me at odds with a very, play to find out, anything goes type behavior? I think it does. Now, I mean, I will be completely transparent, partially because I've been busy didn't have as much time, and partially because I never really know who's going to be at my sessions on Friday. My Fabula Ultima games have of late turned into Slay the Spire dungeons. And which is convenient for me because that way I kind of exactly know what boss they're going to fight and how they're going to fight it. Now, has that become very, formulaic and procedural? Yes. But are we all still enjoying it? Sure. And, luckily I have a group of people who enjoy both, fights and skill challenges, but also, Slay the Spire. So, this was the last, this was the last time that we played, this was the dungeon, quote unquote, that they went through. And, basically the players get to pick where they want to go. And, the unknowns are basically like skill challenges and, there might be involve a social encounter or overcoming a puzzle or a difficult situation. But, it's very gamey. It's been very, very gamey. And, the players pick their route and it's, they go through and, it is literally, it's literally Slay the Spire. Yes, correct. And then eventually they get to, and this is the boss, right? And, and then when they were here, they were fighting, they were fighting Golbez, right? So that was who they were fighting. And that was the, that was the boss. So yes, so that's been our Fabula Ultima thing. So like for example, when they get to a rest, they can either spend 4 IP and use a magic tent and get a full rest, or they can either rest or they can prepare. And if they prepare, they don't use a magic tent, they don't spend a 4 IP, and instead everybody gets 2 Fabula points, right? Anyways, point is that this is very gamey and it's worked for us, but the reason this has been an advantage to me is because this way I can make this villain and kind of ensure that the party fights him at the end of the dungeon. But because I have a group of people who really love Slay the Spire and they love Final Fantasy style combat, nobody has really complained yet or too much. But by the way, this was the fight that we just fought that both Alis, the Dark Knight, and Paulo, the mutant chicken, both went to 0, and Drake, and they surrendered, and Drake had to hand over the fire crystal to High Inquisitor Golbez. So, anyways, by the way, let me tell you something about this Foundry module. Again, I don't like playing online, but a couple of things. Number one, so in Fabula Ultima, right, you have connections to other party members. Okay, they're called bonds. So you can see here Drake has bonds to different members of his party. So for example, to Alis, the Dark Knight, he has a bond of admiration, loyalty, and affection. But he also has a bond to the Demon Soul. He has a bond to the Empire. Okay, he has a bond to Roderick. That was Tim's character. Okay. But if we look at Alis, that's Smith's character, you can see that his bonds are, he has a bond to Golbez and to Hell, right? Well, if we bring up the party sheet and we look at their bonds, you actually get this relationship map that shows how everyone's connected to each other. And it also shows how, each person has different bonds and how they're connected to them differently. So like, for example, you can see that, Drake has this connection to the Demon Soul, whereas like Drake and Alis have these bonds that they're sharing between the two of them and this other stuff. Now, obviously it's not perfect because like you can see like there's this thing over here called the Empire, but then over here you can see this thing called Empire. And then you can see this thing over here called the Empire. So everybody has a bond with the Empire, but it's case sensitive. And in some cases, some people use the and other people don't use the word the. And so it doesn't work that well. But another thing which is really cool is there's a bestiary. Every time the party fights a monster, that monster gets added to the bestiary. And then it also tracks how much the party learns about that monster through using the scan action. And the party has access to this. This is the party's Pokédex, basically. So this is like every monster that they fought in the game. And you can see what percentage they have of that monster. So like they fought mummies, and they don't know anything about the mummy. So they have not studied it. The only thing they know about the mummy is it is vulnerable to fire. And the reason they know it's vulnerable to fire is because somebody did fire damage to the mummy and they saw that it took double damage, so the system automatically updates it. Whereas they did a full study of the skeletal dragon, so they know its level, its hit points, its MP. They know what its might, dexterity, insight, and willpower are, what its defense, magic defense is, all of its affinities, what it's vulnerable to, what it's immune to, what it's weak to, and they know what its attacks are. So yeah. So. And this is the guy that just beat the shit out of them. And it turns out this spell, Vampiric Exsanguination, is really fucking powerful. Anyways, it's a really cool integration. And so, you know, I'm not going to say that playing this way isn't cool, because, you know, it looks like a goddamn JRPG, and I fucking love that, you know, and you get this cool Pokédex, and, you know, that looks cool, you know, so I'm a fan, you know. You know, plus, like, you know, there's fun little mods that you can add, like the boss bar, right? So you can be like, do do do, you know, and it makes this big boss bar go across the top, you know, and as you do damage to the boss, the boss bar, you know, the boss bar moves down, you know. Oh no, we just hit him for 80, you know, he went from 200 to 200, or from 280 to 200. You get to see the boss bar, you know, scroll down. It's, you know, it's fun. You know, we got the music going, and so it's cool. It's fun. It's a neat integration for sure. Anyways, that part has been fun. So, you know, and there was more that I haven't set up everything that I've wanted to set up. You know, I've wanted to set up like the cool scene transition. I definitely have wanted to do that. I haven't gotten around to that. I've also wanted to have it so that when a boss dies, you know, he goes, you know, and just kind of, you know, falls away. But anyways, so we've been having fun with it because we all love Final Fantasy. We love the tropes. You know, we love JRPGs, and we've been leaning into that, you know, and it's been really awesome. But I have found that this weird, I felt a little bit pulled in different directions with, on one hand, the game kind of being like, hey, you should really spend a lot of time and carefully design these really cool monsters and boss fights and put in a lot of cool abilities and customize them so that it's a really fun, cool, interesting puzzle type challenge for your party to overcome. But then on the other hand, the game's like, don't prep, just, you know, it's PBTA, man. It's narrative, play to find out, you know. We've got meta currencies that the players could just spend Fabula points and alter the story at will. You could just go in a completely different direction. And I feel like there's a lot of tension there, especially because I don't like making bosses and monsters. Like, for some people, that is probably fun, and they would just do that anyways, so maybe that's not as much of a tension for them. But I have kind of discovered that. And unfortunately for me, the bestiary is mostly a lot of like boss monsters. And what I really want the bestiary to be full of is a bunch of, you know, tropey, generic, you know, JRPG, Final Fantasy appropriate, you know, like monsters that I can just, you know, oh, it's a grenade, you know, monster. It's a whatever, you know, something stupid from Final Fantasy or whatever. Generic ass monster. So I feel a little bit of tension from it pulling me in opposite directions. On one hand, it's like, prep these really cool, really complex boss fights, but it's also like, don't prep, play to find out. Here's a bunch of meta currency that can take the, you know, story in any direction at any time. you know? And the quick assembly rules, even on the GM screen, are kind of like, in case you need to make a monster, you know, on the go. And at the same time, it's also like, hey, when you're assembling a game, you know, here are all the rules for assembling the game. But also, here is some advice about, you know, keeping the fight interesting and engaging and designing it for the entire group. And, you know, make some assumptions about the group, like one character can reliably restore hit points to 3 or more. One character can remove status effects. 2 characters have enough damage to destroy soldier rank activities in 4 or less attacks without exploiting vulnerabilities. Like, there's a lot of rules for something that's supposed to be like, fuck it, we ball. And again, if you're really into that, awesome. But by the way, one cool thing about this though is, here we go. We kind of get this, you know, this experience here. If players make all the right choices and figure out a good strategy, their odds of winning should be 90%, not 50%, right? So they've already done what the game wants from them, so they deserve it. This is something that I feel like this is one of the reasons why my players have really responded positively to this game, which is if you fight a monster and you go, oh, this guy does a lot of shadow damage. So we're gonna cast a spell that gives us resistance to shadow damage. Oh, he's weak to earth damage. Okay, I'm gonna cast a spell. I'm gonna change out my item and put on something that does earth damage, and I'm gonna cast an elemental shroud to make your thing do earth damage. And then it's like, once you've done that, you kind of just kick the thing's ass. And my group really appreciates that. Like, that's about as much of a puzzle as my group is interested in and or ready, you know, wants to play with. I've read people from my Patreon who like create these incredibly complicated boss fights, and I don't have time for that. You know, I don't think my players have time for that either. So that has been really good for us, especially because a lot of the monsters I make or use fall into pretty well established JRPG tropes. So like when the group fights a mummy, they go, oh, that thing is probably vulnerable to fire. And it is. And they feel smart and rewarded because it was vulnerable to fire. Or, you know, something like that. So that has been really, you know, fun for them and enjoyable for them. I have not really gone onto full tomato pumpkin because honestly, a lot of the fan-made monsters out there, again, I think are too complex. Also, this is another complaint I have. This is just me complaining. Apparently, there are other JRPGs out there other than Final Fantasy. But apparently there is one JRPG series that I have never played. And I guess it was a really big influence for the author of this game, where monsters kind of have random resistances and vulnerabilities. And I absolutely hate that. So, in fact, thank you, that's the one. Shin Megami Tensei. Pumpkin knows this because we've had these conversations before. I am not interested in that at all. In fact, I want my players to kind of sort of be able to suss out, you know, 80% of the time, at least one of the creature's vulnerabilities or resistances just through resonance and just through, you know, tropes. If I put a plant monster in there and the plant monster is, I don't know, vulnerable to earth and light and air and immune to poison and resistant to dark and fire, you know, and it's like, haha, figure out that puzzle, guys. My party, I think, would be like, what the fuck? What? It's a plant. Like, we burn it. You burn plants, you know, like, oh, it's a plant. You poison the plant, you know? Even then, for me, the affinities have to make some kind of sense, you know, for lack of a better word. I really avoid, even when I'm building my monsters, I avoid just, and I'm going to throw a random immunity or resistance or affinity on there just cause. Anyways, I don't find that to be, I don't find that style to be particularly effective or fun, so I don't do it, and I don't think my players would find that style to be particularly effective or fun, so I don't do it for their sake either. And also, I'm lazy, and I don't like making monsters anyways, so it's a lot easier for me to just be like, oh, you know, it's an undead, you know, it's vulnerable to fire and light, it's immune to poison and dark, and you know, just pick some basic stuff like that. So, yeah. Anyways. So again, I understand that there are other JRPGs. Yeah, very lazy. I'm extremely lazy. You think the lazy GM is? You think the lazy DM is lazy? I'm lazier. I promise you. But again, everybody's been having fun. They're enjoying the progression of their characters and, you know, choosing things and building things and getting new items. And another thing that they really like is like another thing that they really like is, like, for example, this is Drake Flameheart. This is Tim's character. He is he's a mastered elementalist, fury, weapon master, and now arcanist. Okay, so he's this kind of like magical brawler, kind of a bit like an avatar, you know, like a bender. But he had no intention of being arcanist. But as we played the game, they kept fighting these like wolf-like creatures, like the dark behemoth and Cerberus. I don't know where Cerberus is. Where is Cerberus? But they kept fighting these creatures, and when Tim killed them, they were like, Tim spent like a Fabula point, and it was like, oh, it's some sort of like primal elemental beast, and Tim's kind of like, I kind of joined with my soul, and Tim's like, oh, wait, that's awesome. I'm going to do that, and it kind of like, I'm going to start taking Arcanist, because that would be really cool to like, you know, join them, right? So there's currently 2 wolves inside of him, so he has, he has the Behemoth Arcanum and the Cerberus Arcanum. And you know, he diegetically went into Arcanist. That's not like what he planned to do. So they've really enjoyed that sort of experience. But the other thing which they like is that, you know, Tim, I don't really know the character sheet that well, as you can see. Tim's a brawler. You know, he uses brawling weapons. But at this point, Tim has 3 different brawling weapons, okay? He has the Iron Knuckle, which was his starting weapon, which is just a basic weapon. But now he has the Storm Fist and the Hell Fist. And the Hell Fist is a one-handed melee brawling weapon that does dark damage. And the Storm Fist does bolt damage. The Storm Fist also gives you multi-2. And the Hell Fist attacks magic defense instead of regular defense. So not only are there a little bit of, you know, different, you know, things, like if Tim's fighting a creature that has really low magic defense, he might switch to the Hell Fist. Or if they're fighting a creature that is vulnerable to dark, Tim might put on his Hell Fist. So they found that really cool too, because these items are things that they've gained through the game or they've bought with their Zenit. So again, it's that kind of diegetic progression, you know, that sort of growth. You know, in the case of a lot of these characters, you know, the character growth has been, you know, look, they're still making their choices because they want to build a cool PC, but a lot of the choices they've made have been because of the things. This is Kairoth. This is Kaz's character. Now he ended up picking up, he was an Esper Spiritus Necromancer. Oh, this must be an old version of Kairoth. Where's the new version of Kairoth? Anyways, something, I don't know why this says he's only level 1, but but he ended up picking up Spiritist because his character was originally sort of like, I'm using the souls in the soul stream as like a source of power. And now he's beginning to realize that like, it's not just a source of power, right? It's like a source of like goodness. It's a source of like, so now he's like kind of taking on like a more like nurturing role, with his relationship to the soul stream and to the spirit energy. And so now he's taken Spiritist. Now, he also used Spiritist to pick up the heal spell because the group really fucking needed the heal spell. But, you know, my group basically played the first 10 levels, 15 levels of the game without the heal spell. But so it's been cool to see the characters kind of, you know, grow that way as well, which is neat. Yeah, I think Matthew here says it really well, which is that... oh, sorry. I'm trying to do 3 things at once. There we go. Watching my players use their levels to tell a story is like my favorite part of this game. Our Tinkerer has been taking levels in passive Entropist levels to show that the Magisphere experiments have begun leaking into them. Right. Matthew, I don't think that's just a Fabula Ultima thing. I think that's a thing for all things. You know, like I'm a big fan of using the mechanical progression of your character to tell the story of your character. And I think you should reflect the fiction in your mechanics. And I think that the mechanics should also reflect the fiction. And I think when the two things are working together side by side, that's where you get the coolest RPG development and growth. And again, we've been having a lot of fun with that for sure in our Fabula Ultima game for absolutely, which has been a lot of fun. Yeah, like I know Smith has a couple weapons now. He has, Smith has 4 swords. He doesn't really need his great sword anymore, admittedly. But he has Crom's Ice Sword, the Flame Burge, and Iron Splitter, which is the newest one he just picked up. And they all do HR plus 10, but the Ice Sword is plus 10 ice, and it goes against magic defense. The Flamberge is plus 10 fire, and it goes against, it's obviously fire damage. And then his newest one, which he just picked up, the Iron Splitter, is HR plus 10 versus, HR plus 10. So it's 10 damage, and it's just normal physical damage, and it's just normal versus defense. But it has this overwhelming quality. Damage dealt by this weapon ignores resistances and immunities. So, it's basically just like guaranteed deeps. It doesn't like, it's not going to like trigger, it's not going to like trigger anything, but he just, wants to get the damage in. Anyway, so very cool character. I think everybody's character is really cool, which has been fun too, watching the characters grow and develop. And as a GM, it's always fun to be a fan of your PCs. Made easier when you actually think they're really cool, but they did get their ass kicked last time, so we'll have to see how it goes. So I don't know how long we're going to keep playing Fabula. I mean, we'll probably keep playing as long as it's fun and people are enjoying leveling up. Again, it's a different experience that I think would be better for me if I really liked making the monsters, and I don't. So I don't. It's what it really comes down to. And so that's kind of been a hampering for me. And unfortunately, and I'm not knocking the bestiary, because the bestiary is really cool and the art is really beautiful, and I'm really glad I bought it, and I'm really glad I got like the super ultimate premium double edition. But the art is the bestiary is sure as hell a lot less, here's normal monsters for you to use, and instead it's a lot of, like I wouldn't even say every other monster, but like most of the monsters in here are elites, solos, champions, bosses, etc., etc. But like, yeah, again, I believe you. And I'll tell you why I believe you. And in fact, I would even go so far as to say it's probably one of the most fun monster creation processes I've done in a long time, even though I don't really like monster creation process. And I'll tell you why. Because I don't have to worry if it's busted. The hardest thing about making a monster for, say, Pathfinder 2 or 5th edition is you have to make the monster, and you have to make it cool, but it can't win. Because if it wins, you TPK the party and everybody dies. Or you fudge. You don't have that problem in Fabula Ultima, right? Like, yes, the game gives you guidelines. Yes, to try to keep the power level balanced or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you make something that is too hard, or whatever, it's okay. The party will just surrender. If you make a villain and you spend a bunch of time making it and the party embarrasses him and kicks his ass, you just spend 2 Ultima points and have him be like, yeah, I'll get you next time, Gadget, and get away automatically. There's nothing they can do about it. So, like, the game kind of gives you these great pressure relief valves, and you don't feel this overwhelming pressure that I better get it right, or, you know, my party is going to scream bloody murder because they have a legitimate right to be upset because I created something that was unfun to play against because it was too difficult or too strong or whatever. So, yeah. So, by the way, I want to show you an example of what I don't like about this book. Again, you may differ. Okay, this is the skeletons section, and it contains several monsters, several entries that are all under the category of skeletons. Okay. Number one, this guy, obviously a badass, right? And these are great because they're not bosses, they're not solos, they're just skeletons, okay? So what I want to highlight here are 2 skeletons. We have Shamblebones, a skeleton, and then we have the Necropolis Guardian, also a skeleton. Both undead, both skeleton. This one's level 10, this one's level 20. And I get they have rolls and stuff like that, but I want to take a look at this skeleton. It is vulnerable to physical damage. It is vulnerable to air damage. It is resistant to lightning damage, bolt damage. It is immune to dark damage. It is resistant to ice damage. It is vulnerable to light damage, and it is immune to poison. Now, this is also a skeleton. It is resistant to physical. It is vulnerable to lightning, immune to dark. It is vulnerable to fire, resistant to ice, vulnerable to light, immune to poison. What's weird to me is how every single one of these skeletons has a different array of resistances and vulnerabilities. Now, I know some of this has to do with their role, like whether the creature's a soldier or not. And I'm okay with that to a certain extent. But it's not always 100% clear to me how and where and why. Like, as a player and as my players, I would kind of be like, oh, these are all skeletons. I feel like they should all kind of, like, why is this skeleton suddenly vulnerable to earth? No other skeleton has been vulnerable to earth. This skeleton, vulnerable to earth and immune to fire. One of the skeletons was vulnerable to fire. And one of the skeletons didn't even care what your fire did. So this one is vulnerable. This one doesn't care if it's on fire. And then yet a third skeleton is immune. So you have normal, vulnerable, immune. So to me, that is not great. And again, that's because of my JRPG biases. Like, if you're playing that Persona Shinjo Mensi Tensei, maybe that's how that is in that game, where it's like, oh, every monster is just a fucking completely new thing. That's cool. But for me, I'm kind of like, I just want a mob of mooks to throw at PCs. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of do that in this game. There are some monsters that like count as half a soldier, so you can use a bunch of them. But I don't necessarily know that like JRPGs work really well with having like a ton of creatures. I mean, it can to a certain extent, I suppose. But anyways, I will say the art in this game, or the art in this book, is like 20 out of 10. I absolutely love it. So, anyways. And then Seabeard, again, I will say, making monsters in Fabula is not a quick process. Even though it's called the quick assembly rules, it's not. And again, it's not something that I'm particularly jazzed about. And it really comes down to the same reason I don't like, I know there's people who love sitting around and making characters and figuring out builds and going on to D&D Beyond or going on to Path Builder and, ooh, what would this character look like at level 5, 10, 15, 20? And, I'll take this feat and this feat. I've never liked doing that. I don't like to do, I actively dislike doing that, actually. And making monsters kind of feels like doing that, and so I just don't like doing it. Andrew says, jumping back 2 hours in the conversation, but I feel the bailing on the concert. 2 weeks back, I went to see Harrison Gordon. They were the second act on the card. They finished at like 10, and we bailed. Yeah, so again, like I said, I amongst other things, like I was like, I'll have to, if I drive down there, I'm gonna have to get a hotel, and then I'll have to drive back tomorrow, and tomorrow's Friday, but it's the start of the Memorial Day weekend. There's probably gonna be a lot of traffic, and I was kind of just talking myself out of it. But then the one thing I was like, they're not even going on till probably 9:30, 10. I'm like, it's so late after I drove 2.5 hours, just to see them. So I ended up doing it. But I do think they're a great band. You should check out Daisy Grenade. Unfortunately, the rest of their tour is sold out. I think, they're basically, they're in New York, so they've been driving across Pennsylvania. They opened the tour in Pittsburgh 2 days ago. Now they're doing Columbus tonight. Then they're going to be in Detroit, which is not sold out, tomorrow. But I didn't go to Columbus. I'm not going to go to Detroit. And tomorrow I'm playing Fabula Ultima. And then after that, it's kind of like a drive up the coast. I think they're doing like Chicago, Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, whatever. Then down through Texas. Basically doing a big circuit. But all of those shows are sold out. I think the next show that they're actually at that isn't sold out is Warped Tour. But I'm probably not going to go to Warped Tour either. So unfortunately, I'll just have to listen to them on Spotify as God intended. But so yeah, so I don't like making monsters, and that's what it really comes down to. I don't like making monsters, and I think that Fabula Ultima, I think part of the design of it is that you're supposed to like making monsters, which is cool. I mean, that's just what the game is about that. And I think the game expects as a GM that you're going to like making monsters. And if I don't like making monsters, I don't want to do that. That's about my limit as well. I like enemies about as complex as those in a dungeon board game. Meaty, but not too complex. Players benefit from learning their traits and strategy and how may appear in the scenario. Yes, I'm kind of the same way. I like, 3 things. It's on the coast. It has a boardwalk. It has a pier. Not about to sit here and watch PBTA lose to OSR. Had 2 death moves trigger in the last 2 nights of the game. The tension of letting the players directly choose their fate is superior. I don't have PayPal. Please add this to the PBTA tip goal. All right. Thank you so much for that. I will shift that over. Oh, that's funny. So I need to subtract 30 from this. There we go. That should update. There we go. PBTA is now winning. Yeah, I mean, again, I think, weirdly, as I've said this before, I actually think I like both of these styles of play. a lot. And I think the reason both of them can be very fun is because in both instances, you are playing to find out. And that's ultimately what I find to be really enjoyable. In a true OSR game, we're playing it, the players, I don't know what's going to happen. We have random encounter rolls. We have random reaction rolls. We have random morale rolls. The players could literally go to any one of 20 different caves in the Caves of Chaos or, anything like that. That is really exciting to me because I don't know where they're going to go. And I get to be like, oh, cool. I get to find out what's going to happen. The modern DM, the modern, prototypical Pathfinder 2nd edition or 5th edition DM, the majority of their prep is reading over and over and over again exactly what's going to happen at tonight's session. And sort of making sure / sweating it that it does. Right? So, to a certain extent, there's kind of a mentality that being surprised in the modern mindset of the DM is a bad thing. Because it means that the players have now gone off script. They've gone off prep. They've gone out of the adventure. And now you're either unprepared or you're spiraling because you got to figure out how do I get them back onto the adventure because I want to keep using this adventure. I want to keep using the next 7 adventures that are in this line or we're on page 50 of a 200-page book. We're going to be come hell or high water. We're using this book. So how do I get them to the next part where they're supposed to be? I find that horrifying and unbelievably boring. But not just that, I find it stressful. I don't like it. So yeah. It's far more interesting for me to figure out, or not to figure out, but to find out what's happening while we're at the script, while we're at the game, in one of our Fabula Ultima sessions, the Empire, the evil Empire, was in their big Imperial fleets headed for Tim's homeworld to steal the fire crystal. And Tim, they rescued Roderick, that was Bob's character, who had the fastest airship in the lands. He was, they're like, the only way we can get there before them is if we, get Roderick. And they're like, okay, let's get Roderick. And they're like, well, there's a little bit of a problem with availability. What's the problem with availability? He's currently in prison. So they had to break him out of Imperial prison, get his airship. They had to race to Tim's homeworld, and they got there. They did really well on their discovery rolls, and they got there before the Empire. And I was like, okay, well, what are you guys going to do? And I was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, they're going to prep and they're doing thing. And they spent some Fabula points. They made up some bullshit. And this whole thing came up where they ended up having to undergo the trial of fire. And that way they could Tim could take the fire crystal with him and free it from its imprisonment. And now it would be a part of him. I was completely unprepared for that, by the way. Good night, Thad. But it was awesome because I had no idea that that's what was going to happen. Now, unfortunately, Fabula Ultima kind of expects that you will have really cool, awesome monsters prepped. And so I was kind of left in a lurch and kind of had to just drag in some random monsters that I maybe had already used before. And I'm not saying it was bad. My group didn't really care. But, was it the best example of all of those principles of really cool, interesting fight mechanics that Fabula Ultima talks about? No, because I was, having to make shit up on the fly, and it was, kind of a rough go. Luckily, I've been doing this for a while, but it was, kind of left me in a lurch. So that's where there's kind of a tension between the two things of that. So yeah, I agree. I think that is definitely the case. Oh, exactly. I literally took a monster, duplicated it, added 10 to its level, changed its name to greater frost elemental, made its token a little bit bigger, and gave it a color scheme shift. That's exactly what I did. 100%. Exactly. Good morning. Good morning, Lenny. Dr. Stevel says, lol, I'm running AV, Abomination Vaults, in PF2 and not reading ahead. So it's fun for me too, and I get to see what happens along with the players. We discover together. They are okay with this. Yeah, I mean, that's, respect. I will say, though, Abomination Vaults does have the advantage that it is a dungeon, like a proper dungeon. And dungeons give you a lot of leeway because you can legitimately say, look, you can go anywhere you want. You can't go to a room that doesn't exist. So by definition, a dungeon sort of forces you down certain pathways. So it's in a way, a dungeon is a railroad. It's just a collection of railroads. But you as the GM are giving the players, carte blanche to go down whatever path they want, but they can only go down the paths that are there. And that's what makes them so useful and as a tool for explorative play that you can also still prep for, Oh, listen, I'm 100% on board with that. And by the way, my group actually appreciates that because they have the stats from when they fought the bandit when they fought the bandit scoundrel, and they rightfully assume, which is correct, that by me making it a bandit enforcer, all I did was increase the level, give it more hit points, and maybe bump up a stat or give it a new action. But everything else is the same. And they go, hey, when we fought the bandit scoundrels, they were vulnerable to earth damage. Okay, I'm going to use earth attack against the bandit enforcer. And it's like, oh, it worked. It was vulnerable. And they actually enjoy that. They actually feel like rewarded for that because they're like, hey, we figured out what the bandit scoundrel did. Now we know what the bandit line does. And the next time we fight bandits, we feel more equipped to fight them. And if I was like swapping that out and changing that up every single time, I think they would feel less rewarded for playing. Yeah. Dungeons are really sweet. I wish I could figure out how to get the time to really, lock the fuck in on Shadow Deep, and also either just say fuck it and just create a dungeon the way that everybody else creates dungeons, or also or settle on something that is like better, like when it comes to dungeon procedures, right? Like there's nothing wrong with the dungeon procedures of OSE or Shadow Dark, but they're kind of boring and they've been around for a long time. And I do think that there are certain structural problems with them. And I think that you're leaving something a bit on the table by using them. And unfortunately, coming up with a good solution for that has its own problems, right? Which is, number one, you have to create the new system. But the other problem is that you're going to get purists who say, oh, that's not OSE then. That's not Shadow Dark, And again, I covered a lot of this with Evan from Nimble and even ended up inspiring his new dungeon procedure from a conversation that we had. And, that conversation that, what I said inspired him. He's like, oh, that's a really cool way to think about it. And he changed his dungeon procedure. And that his way of his changing it made me be like, oh, I could try a different procedure. But like when I played Dungeon Time Extreme, which was an old school dungeon crawl, we literally played B2, Keep at the Borderlands, right? I used this kind of doom pool mechanic from the Marvel superhero game, and it was really powerful to watch the party sort of see, the tension build up. Very similar in the way that Daggerheart, that watching the fear build up is a great way of communicating to the player, hey, the tension is rising, which is cool, and I like that. But some people might say, oh, that's not old school. That's new school. That's, whatever. completely right, clandestine. A lot of people do just enjoy acting out someone else's story, you know? And, yep, I accept that, you know, as being a truth. I may not personally think that's that interesting, but I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong, you know, for sure. And in fact, clandestine, I would say, I think a lot of modern video games fall into that definition, you know, or that description as well. And people obviously like those a lot. What's up, Super Dice? Yeah, tension pools are cool. Yeah. Well, that's my hope, Pumpkin. The question is, you know, how do you do it and make it and do it in a way that isn't like an absolute, you know, horrible pain in the ass. I don't know if you remember our last Shadow Deep stream, but we had gotten so far off the reservation. I had this idea, right, of using hex flowers to track tension. And, you know, obviously with time and distance from that, I'm kind of like, okay, that's one of those, don't confuse interesting with fun or interesting with practical, you know. And while I think it was a really interesting idea, you know, it's not really particularly practical, nor is it particularly see. And then I get people like this who only just, they're throwing kindling onto the fire, you know. Again, I thought it is a cool idea, but it is not, you know, it is not the proper mechanic for that instance, you know. Yes, the squeeze significantly greater than the juice. Yes, maybe more juice, right? +1 juice, but +10 squeeze, right? So definitely not worth. Yeah, solo, that would be really cool. Solo, I agree. Super Dice, I like that. Solo. So, what the fuck is a hex flower? A hex flower is a random table that has a form of memory. So normally when you roll on a random table, each roll is an independent trial, right? It's like rolling at the roulette wheel, right? The previous roll doesn't affect the current roll. It's just a brand new random roll. The way a hex flower works is the prior roll affects the current roll. So the one of the default examples for this is a weather table. Usually the one that people use a lot. So let's find a weather table. Okay, sure. Okay, so imagine there we go. Sorry. Imagine that. So you're rolling a 2d6 roll. So imagine that you have a marker, right here in the middle, and it's sunny with a partly raining. Okay. Well, when we want to see what the weather's going to be like, all right, that was yesterday. That's where we're at. We have a little marker here, the weather marker. Okay. And so we rolled 2d6. All right. Now, most of the time, we're going to go down or to the left because we're going to roll a 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9. Okay. Moving up and to the right is rarer because we only go up if we roll a 12. We only roll 2 or 3 if we go up, to the right. So we roll, let's say, a 9. So we go from sunny and sprinkling to partly sunny. Okay. Because we move down and to the left. Well, now we're here, which means that tomorrow's weather is very likely it's going to be one of these things around us. We're not going to go straight from a brilliant, bright, sunny day to horrifying thunderstorm, right? The only way that we'll get to horrifying thunderstorm is if we make our way up and to the right on this table. And that way, by knowing what the weather is today, you kind of have an idea of what the weather will be like tomorrow. Whereas if I were to pull up the 5th edition DMG random weather table, you'll just see that it's like, hey, every day roll a D100. And you could literally roll sunny, and then the next day you could roll, blizzard. And then the next day you could roll windstorm. And then the next day you could roll drought, right? Because each roll of the dice is just totally independent of where we were at before, right? So, anyways, so that's how that works. Right, and then there'd be a meteor, right? Well, that's what the Lance. This is what the hazard is, right? When you get to hazard, that's the meteor. So, how do you implement tension dice? The way that I have usually implemented tension dice is, again, there's a lot of different ways that you could do this, Scott. One way you could do it is, and I'm not saying that this is the best way, I'm just saying it is a way. You could have a pool of dice, or you have a bowl in front of your GM screen. Okay. And every hour in the game, or every 30 minutes in the game, you roll all the dice. Okay. And if the total of the dice is 20 or more, you have some sort of encounter, right? As the party takes actions, you might drop dice into the bowl. If the group very quietly makes their way through a room, you might not put any dice in the bowl. If the group fails to pick a lock on a door and ends up kicking it down, you might say, oh, you succeed, and then ding, 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 you drop a D6 in the bowl. The group triggers a trap, and there's a loud splintering sound as a log comes smashing down into them. You add a D10 to the pool. Oh, the party gets into a big fight with the goblins. They're letting loose spells, and there's, bloody murder. Boom, you add a D12 to the pool, right? And you're not guaranteeing. Now, by the way, so maybe you add a D6 and add a D10. You roll the dice. You get a 13. It's not a 20, but the players know that the tension is building, right? The tension is building. The tension is building. And now suddenly there's, a couple D8s and some D6s in there. There's that D12. And now the players realize, oh, there's a chance that we could get into an encounter. It's not guaranteed, but there's a chance. And so that tension continues to build. But also, paradoxically, you can also really reward the players, because maybe the players do something really clever or really smart. Maybe they find a secret door, and they leave the path or the track that they've been on, and they take a secret passageway that goes through, the back, hidden back passage, and they enter into a new area of the dungeon where they haven't been yet. You might take dice out of the bowl, right? The tension has gone down. The players are kind of, they've got the advantage. They've got the incognito. Why not use a clock? Simple. A clock is discrete, right? A clock is either full or it's not full. If the clock has 2 segments ticked, there's no encounter. If the clock has 3 segments ticked, you know that the next time it ticks, you're going to have an encounter. So there's a tension, but there's not the unknown tension. Does that make sense? So there's kind of this, like, it's very deterministic. Like, that the encounter is either definitely not going to happen or definitely going to happen. What's cool about dice and a pool of dice is you could roll really badly, or you could roll really, lowly. Oh, clock should never go down. That is so not true, Derek. I mean, even Blades in the Dark talks about clocks going down all the time, about the party working to untick clocks to try to make things not happen. I mean, I think clocks should go down all the time. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a hot take, but I don't agree with it. I'll say that. Also, yes, that pool of dice is visible. The players can see it. They know how many dice are in there, you know? Whereas I love tug of war clocks, right? I love racing clocks, tug of war clocks. I love all the different clocks. Yeah. Yes, in this case, we're talking about random encounters, right? It's not really tension if it could be something cool and awesome and good. It would have to be something, you know. Now, stacking dice, cool. The only problem there is, you know, obviously you're testing the character's dexterity rather than their, you know, their skill. And of course, a little bit harder to do when you play online, you know? That's okay. That's why can't clocks never resolve? Why is that a bad thing? Yeah, I don't know that that doesn't surprise me that they have one, but I'd have to check it out. I have never seen it. Anyways, in a standard random encounter, you know, when you play old school D&D, if you play Shadow Dark, every 20 minutes you roll a d6. On a roll of a 1, there's a random encounter. So the problem is you might never get a random encounter, or you might get like 5 in a row. And it's it kind of loses its its fun if it never happens or if it happens all the time. But also too, I like it because I like giving the players that feedback about how their actions, okay, are influencing the dungeon or influencing their situation. That's what it really comes down to. It's another lever, or it's another dial that I can use as a GM to communicate to my players, and not just in a fluffy bullshit way, but in a real mechanical way, how their choices and the consequences of their actions, end up pushing them, end up affecting the way that the game plays out, you know? So I think that's what it really is about. It's less about the mechanic. It's more about giving the players a way to interact with that mechanic, and in both a good way and a bad way. As in, hey, you made a lot of noise, or you made a really bad decision, or you've alerted the kobolds and now they're on high alert. I'm adding a bunch of dice to this pool because I want to reflect that. And as a player, there's something very visceral and about seeing the GM, take those dice and, drop them and add them into the pool, because then it's not just him describing something. It's a meaningful thing, It's the difference between the GM saying, you get hit and it knocks the wind out of you and you feel really bad, versus the GM saying, oh, you get hit and you take 5 hit points of damage, right? Like, one just has a lot more weight behind it, because you're actually mechanically interacting with the game. I would never do that. Yeah, and Gil, correct, Gil. The question is how much can you push that before, the OSR people will hang you up by your petard? Like how much can you push that before the OSR people are like, it is not OSR, it is no true Scotsman, which is kind of cool. It's funny, Andrew. I don't know how long you've been with us, but that used to have a picture of Conan behind it. I don't know if we still do. Let me see if I still have it in there. If I do, I can literally just turn it on, and it'll immediately turn into Conan. Tip goal. Let me see. Let me see if it's still there. That'd be really funny if it's still in there. Image. No, I do not. I must have deleted it, but it used to have it. You know what it does have? It does have all the images. It does have all the images from our a fistful of flowers Pathfinder 2 one shot. Oh, good times. Anyways, who else do we have? Anyways, it's 1:30, and this was supposed to be just a random fun stream. So yeah, cool beans. We've got all 4 of our games. Okay. So I don't know, Andrew, if you missed, that's what I said. I don't know when the last time we did the, I don't know when the last time we did the Conan. That's what I'm saying. It could have been like 5 years ago. Honestly, that's why I was saying, I don't know if you've ever seen us do the Conan before. But it's been a long time, but we love the Riddle of Steel around here. Yes. That would be a good shirt. Anyways, banner thumbnail material here. What else do we got? We got there we go. Oh, good times. But what was I gonna say? Oh, but you are right, Andrew. At the end of the day, it's neither OSR or PBTA which is best. It's the games. It's the cool games that we play along the way, right? So I was gonna say we've got 4 games in the process of being assembled: a Blaze of the Dark game, an Avatar game, a Daggerheart game, and a One Ring game. Avatar is trying to figure out the what era they're going to play in. Kyoshi era, 100 Years War era, Aang era, Roku era, which is cool. The Blaze of the Dark group is trying to figure out what crew they're going to be. The only one I know is I think Cult is off the table. The One Ring group is in the process of filling out their setting grid so that they can do their Session 0 backstory creation. And Daggerheart is just getting what? Just getting started. Because the Daggerheart crew, the problem with the Daggerheart is I don't have any experience with Foundry Born and or this Alchemy VTT, so I have like no experience with that, and I need to figure out their schedule. And Steven Glicker from Roll for Combat is in the group, and he is going to be on a safari for like the next 2 weeks. So yeah, scheduling is a little bit more of a challenge there. Yes, you are correct, Andrew. That is 100% true. Holy shit. It was, I believe, it was an anime guy going Super Saiyan. That is correct. So that is exactly what that was from that stream. So you are 100% correct. But Stone Week will never be the same again. I know. There we go. No idea. That is a great that is a great question, clandestines. What else? I think. Do we have any videos here? Hold on a sec. We might have some videos. Hold on a sec. Let's see what we got here. No, we don't have any videos. I thought we had like an anime video. But I don't know if you guys can hear this. Sorry about that being so loud. That was from that session. That was what Andrew was talking about. Good stuff. Yeah, okay, that was Goku. So you know this. We also had. Oh, that's the same one. So as you may recall, as we got more tips during that stream. By the way, if you want to go see True Disaster, go watch A Very Poppet Christmas. I'm sorry, Fistful of Flowers. Fistful of Flowers. Every time we reach a certain new level of tip, we would enter a new level of kawaii and anime. And every time we crossed one of those thresholds, that would play and there would be this big explosion on the screen, and like my background started becoming more and more Goku anime-like. And the screen, every time we reached one of those new thresholds, got more and more and more random waifu in anime chicks, culminating in a complete and total clusterfuck. So there's two good ones. They're both horrific to watch, but they're both good because they're basically us trolling ourselves. And that is A Fistful of Flowers and A Poppet Christmas Carol. That's it, A Poppet Christmas Carol, which includes Elsa, from the Ice Queen from Disney, seducing and having sex with Frosty the Snowman. So there's that. Yeah, well, did you dress up as Snapdragon and the Sunflower Rogue? Because if you didn't, we did. We dressed up in costume, bitch. And by the way, for those of you keeping track at home, those two streams, Fistful of Flowers, and you know what? Not everyone's going to go, so it's important. Let's see if I can bring it up here. Here we go. Yeah, so Smith was Fluff Fang, Vin was Bottle Speaker, Damien was Reaching Rings. Damien and Vin, just both long-term patrons of the group. Bob was the GM. This was the Fistful of Flowers. So let's cut. So this is.
So tonight
that came out really good, Derek. That's great.
So this is what it looked like at the beginning of the stream.
We are going to be playing,
you can see that we have the tip goal here of cute, cute, heart, uwu, oh my gosh, kawaii.
Sorry, Paizo.
And of course, as we got more and more tips, you can see that the screen starts to change. Suddenly there's leshies everywhere. It's getting more and more cute.
I'm on the West Bank. This is
Look, we've got more leshies, more plants.
On the other side now.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
it's a river. It's
at the end of the stream,
I like to.
I gotta find the exact moment.
I like to think that my character just just multiple attack penalty attack as the flail back out. I have a child. Oh my God! GM Scott just tipped $50. We're going
timing. You can hear him point that roll.
We're going to full Kawaii mode.
Nice.
Here we go.
Does this mean I can't be like my character won't?
Oh no! All right, we are in complete destruction mode. All right.
You can't see any.
So this was our overlay.
Oh, I got the stream open on another
Gosh,
window.
this is terrible.
Oh man, what a
I am gonna.
But I was gonna
re-roll
say-
that with the hero point I just got.
which is really important, is this was the most money we ever made on this entire channel. This was over 3 years ago. This was October 2022. So yeah, coming up on 4 years ago, and I have never made more money than I made this night on this entire channel. This one stream made more money than entire runs of our other actual plays. We did the entire Quest for the Frozen Flame actual play, and that entire made less money than this one stream. We did the entire Root actual play series, made less money than this one stream. So, yeah. Anyways, was quite. They sure do, Pumpkin. They really do. Loved to see me suffer. It's very true. But it was a lot of fun. You know, it was awesome. Bob was GMing. You know, Smith and I mean, most of the tips usually had something to say something along the lines, or like most of the comments have to say something like, "We feel bad for Bob," you know, because he had to GM for me and Smith, which is a double trouble. And then, but it was fun. We got to play with Vin and we got to play with Damien, which was a lot of fun. Now, what you don't see is that this was the primary tip goal at the top. But over here on the side, there was a secondary tip goal, which was to launch the Pop It Christmas Carol. And that we ended up doing a few months later, and that was the Pop It Christmas Carol. So that one consisted of Smith, Bob, and then 3 of our patrons. Vin and Damien returned, and then we also had Donnie, who joined us. And everybody was a Pop-It trying to take out Christmas for various reasons. So Smith is dressed up as Elsa. He was an Elsa doll. Bob was Elf on a Shelf. Donnie was a Nutcracker soldier. Vin was a Mr. Potato Head doll, and Damien was a plushy Cthulhu. One of my favorite things, you could either tip for naughty or tip for nice. If you tip for nice, the party would get a buff. If you tip for naughty, the party got, fucked over. One of my favorite parts about this is at the end, they killed Santa Claus. And they actually killed Santa Claus really easily. It's kind of hard to see here, but Santa Claus is large. Donnie was a fighter. He was a fighter with a pickaxe. That was the Nutcracker soldier. And he kills Santa really easily. And then Donnie, while playing the game, tipped like $200 on the naughty list, which triggered Rudolph to enter the... because Rudolph was actually like... It's like an FF1ism, but Rudolph was like Warmech from FF1. He was like this super rare, really dangerous encounter. You didn't want to encounter Rudolph. But then Donnie was like, I want fucking Rudolph. I want his soul. And so Donnie tipped money against himself while playing the game in order to make Rudolph show up and enter into the combat. Oh, look at this. Like, for example, Santa draws a result from the nice table. Hark, hear the bells. PCs add 1d20 sonic damage to all of their attack rolls for the rest of the encounter. Oh, somebody else also tipped. They got now with Kung Fu Grip. Chat votes for which PC gains access to Flurry of Blows, but they get it for every weapon. What was really cool about this too is we were also doing a bingo giveaway. Everybody had bingo cards, and as stuff happened during the game, I think it's called Bingo Maker. Is that what it's called? Bingo Baker? Bingo Maker? Bingo Baker. It is called Bingo Baker. Which naturally, of course, we have premium Bingo Baker. Hopefully the site's still up. That'd be sick. Okay. Probably that. Okay, yeah, cool. So so like this is an example of a bingo card that people had. And whoever won the bingo card, I think won $100. And so different people had different cards. And what was great is one of the cards that somebody had was there's a way. Oh, here we go. One of the cards that somebody had. Oh yeah, here it is. Here, this is the one that won. So they had someone had a critical hit for 150 damage, and really the only chance for this happening was Donnie, because he was using a pickaxe, which is like, that's the fatal deadly whatever massive super crit weapon in Pathfinder 2. And finally, like right near the end of the session, Donnie got the massive crit, and everyone was like, yes, and someone was like, bingo. But you can see they won on math is tight, Vin gets mad at a pun, critical hit for 150, something other than perception for initiative, and the naughty goal got over $150. But they also got checked for get fucked, Derek gets frustrated with the VTT, someone hits with a maxed out map attack, a bottle of booze is on camera, a monster left alive with less than 5 hit points, Derek ignores the rules of Pathfinder 2nd edition to have fun instead, and then great role playing, Debbie. Okay. Yes. Okay, a couple of things. Okay, number one, you're forgetting the most important part, Vin. That was also back when I had a crew of people who were always available. Now I don't have that. So that's one. Number two, we played Pathfinder 2, so it was actually a reasonably popular game, and almost everyone on our Discord played that. So there's that. So some other people got. I think some people just kept recording even after somebody won, just because they wanted to see if they would win. We might have even had a prize for second place. Like this one here, we got. Get fucked, Paizo's razor, someone is really drunk, then let's get ready to RPG, Bob types loudly at his keyboard, critical role is mentioned, somebody leaves their chair during the game. Elsa says let it go. PC earns a hero point by actually playing well. Smith's mic cuts out. Innocent bystanders are taken out. Donnie is fed up and disgusted. Derek has to pull up Archives of Nethys. Unmarked, by the way. Encounter is resolved non-violently. Unmarked, by the way. Oh, good times. Anyways, so you can see we had 50 people playing bingo and, doing all sorts of crazy stuff here. But it was good times. Yeah, Smith was a puppet sorcerer. Bob was a puppet rogue. Donnie was a puppet fighter. Vin was a puppet thaumaturge. and Damien was a poppet bard, I think. Oh, there's Rudolph. Yeah, so Rudolph got summoned. Yeah, so I rolled on the naughty table, and I got a 23, which is let the hype boss decide. Hype boss is whoever basically has tipped the most money. And the hype boss was Donnie. And it says, if the hype boss is present in chat, they can pick some suitable punishment for the PCs. And he picked, I want to fight Rudolph. So Rudolph showed up, and they got to fight Rudolph. So everyone's laughing because Donnie picked to fight Rudolph. Good times. Oh, there you go. Santa's dead. Boothby in chat says Bob, just type louder. Oh my gosh, this is so good. But good times. Good times. Good times. All right. So yeah, we used to have fun on this channel, and now we're just sad. That's all. That's what it really comes down to. But Pumpkin says, good old Paizo's razor. Forgot about that. Been living happy and PF2 free for a while. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's fine. It's a fun game, you know, but you gotta appreciate it for what it is, you know. And if I'm being completely honest with you, the way I would want to play PF2 is like that, you know. I really have a hard time taking the game, you know, pretty seriously in any stretch of the imagination. And I think that's a game. I think it tries to be serious. At least D&D kind of knows that it's silly. I think, you know, maybe it doesn't. Maybe nowadays they're trying to be too dramatic, but I think at the end of the day, like D&D knows, you know, it's. Yeah, I think Starfinder's pretty sweet. Starfinder's pretty cool. Again, I don't really have a desire to, like, you know, have the gridded combats right now, but I do think Starfinder's really sweet. And like I said, there's a lot of stuff that I don't like in Pathfinder 2 that I actually am okay with from in Starfinder. Like all the weird races and ancestries, I'm more okay with it in Starfinder 2nd edition. So, yeah, I think that sounds about right. So tomorrow will be Fabula Ultima, and then actually no, I'm not running any games this weekend because it's Memorial Day. Yeah, it's Memorial Day weekend, and some of my tour players are out, so no games this weekend, and then but we're going to be getting a bunch of games coming, which are going to be put into actual play. And, you know, I can't promise you they'll be as fun as the Poppet. But, you know, hey, you know, maybe you want to watch some wildly more unpopular game like The One Ring or Blaze in the Dark. There's always a chance for that. Mythic Bastionland is so cool. I was talking about this, I think, yesterday. Just such a cool game. Such a beautiful game. Such a unique and interesting and weird game. A lot of the new SR stuff doesn't hit me because it's just too weird and it's too out there. But this game strikes a really good balance between being like mythical and you know, and rooted in you know, Arthurian legend, and still being a little weird with the sages and the myths. The seers and the myths. I think it's really, really cool. You enjoyed that, Pumpkin. That's good. I mean, it was, you know, I don't know that we really did, you know, I think it was a pretty normal session 0. Obviously, what I'm really looking forward to, you know, is doing the setting grid stuff with everybody. And we're going to be doing that just in chat. We're going to be using Discord because I think that's going to be really really cool and really convenient for everything. And of course the group is, you know, filling out their, the setting grid, right? And so like I said, I made a I made a custom. Well, I made with a lot of help from Claude. I made a variant of the backstory deck that uses One Ring cards. So, you know, they're much more focused around One Ring type stuff rather than drama or adversarial relationships between the party members. That might just not really feel appropriate, you know, in a game like that. So like, you know, this one is tagged with Fellowship and Shadow. You and a random PC arrived too late to help someone at place. Neither of you still speaks of it much. What do you each carry from that day, you know? So first impressions. Go around the company, choose one other PC and describe your very first impression of them. Then let that player say whether you are right or not. The claim released. You had a right to pursue something, a wrong done to you, or a debt owed, or a claim at a place, and you chose to let it go. Was it wisdom to do so, or are you still not sure? So again, you know, fun. I'm completely agreeing with you that sometimes playing the backstory cards, creating the world together could be more fun than, you know, whatever. So, but yeah, I mean, we were already, you know, I tried to promise everybody, you know, because scheduling is a pain in the butt, and we had already gone for 3 hours, and I didn't want to like push it to like 4 or 5. So, plus, I think doing it on Discord will be nice because, you know, people can take a little bit more time to think about their answers instead of feeling, you know, put on the spot, you know. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I say collab, Microscope, yeah, Microscope is great. You know, one of the things I want to definitely do, at some point with, do I have it downloaded? No, maybe I don't. At some point, what I want to do is play online through a play somehow, or I don't know, do it asynchronously or do it offline or something like that. But one of my favorite games of all time is Dawn of Worlds, which is this old free game that was like, it's been on the internet for like 20 years or something like that. Well, Lamp Black and Brimstone, the people who published Stonetop, they recently kind of basically remade it, and they called it World Wizard, and it is a collaborative world building game. Now, this is for if you've played Dawn of Worlds, which I've talked about before on my streams. It's nothing like super new, but it's definitely cleaned up because, you know, World Wizard Dawn of Worlds was like a, you know, handmade project using Microsoft Word. You know, this is an actual game designer doing it. But you can see here the core inspiration is Dawn of Worlds, and yes, it's the one where you build a map. Yeah. But yeah, you basically go around and you kind of act as as gods and create geography for your worlds, and, you know, literally create terrains, and each of you sort of, you know, creates and adds to the different maps, you know. And it's really cool. I mean, again, it's basically Dawn of Worlds. So if you've played Dawn of Worlds, it's nothing, you know, super foreign there. But that's pretty cool. So like, and one of the things that I like to do is like, you know, because again, side note, tangent. One of the things that people always say is like, man, the map from Lord of the Rings sure looks weird. You know, like, why is Mordor just surrounded by 3 sides by mountains? It just looks really unnatural. And the fact of the matter is, it was, because it was created by the gods. Like, it wasn't created by geographical processes. They literally raised mountains, you know, as part of like their war efforts, right? It's a very like, the world was deliberately sculpted by, you know, intelligent beings with an agenda. And so one of the things that I love about this game is, you know, they talk about it's not a competition. Try to think of World Wizard less as a competitive board game as more as a platform for collaborative, constructive, creative exchanges. That being said, I love the idea of sort of deciding, like, which primordial creator deity are you? You know, to kind of like give you like a theme, you know, to your actions. You know, like, are you, you know, the smith or the hunter? Or are you the great storm? Or are you, you know, the shadow of darkness? You know, and I like the idea of kind of like, kind of role-playing it a little bit, right? And having a little bit more of a personality, and sort of playing yourself up as one of these ancient primordial sort of deities. But one of the cool things, and this is true from Dawn of Worlds too, is you can see that at the beginning of the game, during the primordial age, right, it basically costs none of your points to create mountains and rivers and terrains. But as you start moving into, say, the prehistoric age, right, when life finally begins to flourish on the world, now creating terrain costs more points. And by the time we get to the ancient age, creating a new mountain range or a new forest or something costs a lot of points, right? So it's cheap in the beginning of the game to like raise a mountain range or craft a new sea or carve a great river. But as you get later and later into the age, through the ages of the world, it becomes harder and harder, but it becomes cheaper to do other things. And you know, that's what's really cool. Yeah. So again, it's Dawn of Worlds, but updated, which is really great. And it's a really fun game. So, and it says here, when you create an avatar, you become their steward. An avatar might be a hero or a queen or a great monster, an elemental entity, a demon, or even an earthly incarnation of a god. Choose a hex on the map as the place where your avatar first becomes known. Describe them, or roll on the avatar table for ideas. Choose and record their starting alignment, good, lawful, neutral, chaotic, evil, and give them a name or basic descriptor. You can always name them later. Then later on, you can have your avatar do a deed. Note, you can have another avatar. You can do a deed with someone else's avatar. It just costs more points. That avatar might discover an artifact, lead an army to conquer a city, oversee the construction of a great wonder, forge an alliance with another avatar, or anything else you can think of. The only requirement is that the deed be significant, the making of history, if not legend. If you need ideas, roll on the deed table. And then, of course, you can see some PBTA thing here. If it would impact another player, roll 2d6. On a 10 or higher, you do the deed. On a 7 through 9, you do it, but there's a trade-off. And on a 6 or minus, the deed can be accomplished, but only at a great and irrevocable cost. And you can, you know, create a new people, you know, so like you can literally be like, I awaken the elves, you know, I craft the dwarves out of the stuff of the mountains, you know, or whatever else, you know, it doesn't have to necessarily be fantasy, right? So it's a really fun game. Dawn of Wars is great. Dawn of Worlds is great. This is even better because it's from the people at Lamp Black. So number one, it's just better written. And number two, they added all these really cool Oracle tables. So if you get stuck, you know, you can always just roll on the table and come up with something cool. So, you know, so it's like, oh, hey, I need an avatar. So I'm going to go with 46. So it is a legendary. It is a legendary messenger. Right? Or, you know, and you're like, I create the emissary of the Valar, you know, who comes to Middle Earth to tell the elves that you are to journey west with me to be saved from the depredations of Melkor. And we have made a new world for you called Valinor, and you should come and live with us in peace and tranquility. You know, and I've created this legendary messenger. Or maybe I've created a fire 91. I've created a fire thief, but I don't know what that means, but again, it's all about just creative, making shit up and going with it and having fun and cool stuff, really sweet stuff. Would love to do that on stream as well, with a cool group of people who are really, clever and creative and can roll with the punches. That'd be a lot of fun too. So much I want to do. All right, now it's 2 a.m. I'm out. Again, I'll probably be busy this weekend, but we'll be back. We still got a month before NightCon, so plenty of streams before then. Hopefully, we know One Ring is going to be getting recorded and sent out. I'm hopeful that at least one or two of the other shows will get recorded and sent out. Garblag, you got up just in time to see me sign off. So I'm hoping that we'll get a nice steady stream of actual plays, in addition to all of our normal regular content. I'm going to be a pretty busy bee this summer, running games, going to conventions, running my own convention, and of course doing streams for you all, as well as talking and geeking out about RPGs with my awesome, incredible, wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. So hopefully you'll check us out. You'll join us there. Otherwise, I will see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace.